across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome to the home of common sense. So much to talk about. As you've been hearing, the King and the Queen have welcomed Donald and Melania Trump to Windsor Castle. This is the second state visit for Donald Trump, arriving by Marine One. They were initially greeted by the Prince and Princess of Wales before a grand carriage procession took them through the Windsor estate. This was cracking stuff. This will be the pinnacle of anything that Trump does in 4 years in second term in office. We'll have more on that story, of course. Also this afternoon, Keir Starmer's UK-France deportation plan is in disarray yet again as legal challenges and protests continue to block flights. With over 5,000 migrants crossing in August, his flagship policy is failing. Very simple question. Should Labour just give up on immigration? I genuinely 100% think they should just leave it alone and wait for the next lot to deal with it. And millions of pensioners face income tax as state pension rises go to nearly the £12,570 threshold. No plans to raise tax limits. Campaigners slam the creeping injustice set to impact millions by 2027. You see, that's how they trouser the Wonga over there at the Treasury. Very clever stuff. We'll have more on that as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000 is where you'll find us. Chloe Dobbs joins us shortly. Trump is in town. Things are looking good at the moment. Microsoft and Google, just two of the big boys that are lobbing billions into the UK economy. I'm sure Keir and Don will be mulling this one over and clinking a few glasses over their mutual success. They can also both discuss what it's been like to have a few turbulent weeks in office. I'm sure Trump still haunted by Epstein and Starmer plagued by Mandelson, who's haunted by Epstein. They have some commonality there. You can hear the president telling him, chill, Keir, chill, it'll be over soon. It's a beautiful thing. But the one thing they won't be discussing, the one thing they can't really discuss with any sagely nod to each other, is immigration. You see, Big Don has made it work. In the US, folk are even scared to come back from holiday in case they get arrested as illegals. No one is trying to hop over the Mexican border anymore. Meanwhile, over here, Starmer is quivering like a hobo's whippet. Things are not looking good as he licks his wounds at the latest calamitous news on his miserable, even laughable, immigration policy. I mean, to call it a policy is generous. I mean, there isn't one, is there? Not really. And what there is not fit for the bin. Should they just give up? Is that it? The second planned one-in, one-out deportation thing has failed again. It's taken off without a single migrant. The plane took off without a single migrant on board. This is Air France. Over there at Air France, they must be counting the big bucks. Loads of spare seats because no one's getting on it. The flight went from Heathrow to Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, left with no asylum seekers after more last-minute challenges again blocked the start of the deportation pact. For some reason, the ineptitude, and in fact, I don't want to use the phrase in fairness to this government, but I think you'd have to say this would have happened under Rishi Sunak. There's nothing, we don't live in a dictatorship, and I understand we have procedures, so you don't just have a bloke sitting in number 10 or wherever going, nope, that's not going to happen, we do this now. We have a process, and that process is to protect the rule of law and to protect the democratic process so that you don't get mad clowns running the show who just decide when they wake up in the morning, depending on their mood, what they're going to do. So I get the system, but the system badly needs some sort of reform. And when you have quite clear examples of people who've already been selected out of the many, and there's not many of them, to be deported to France, and then that is then challenged, you realise this is just a joke, isn't it? It's a kind of, it's a show trial thing. Almost. So you've got the lawyers who know how to play the system. Doesn't take much to throw a few spanners in the work, tell a judge or a magistrate that things aren't good and they've got it all wrong, and they will halt the proceedings. I mean, this just seems extraordinary. It's reckoned that not just lawyers but charities as well have frustrated the Home Office's plans to return failed asylum seekers detained last month under that pact with the French administration that Starmer carved out with Macron. So with all of this in mind, should Labour just give up on immigration? Should they just go, do you know what, we can't make it work, we're not going to bother trying to make it work. There's nothing we can really do. We are hampered at every level. I don't even think it used to be. Before the channel crossings, but call us on that 0344 499 1000. The lines are open now. Before this, of course, we had people whose sort of favoured method of legging it across the channel was try to cling to the back axle of a Fiat 500 or the top of a lorry or inside some tarpaulin or some other thing like that. Some would even run through the Channel Tunnel. They sort of put a stop mostly to that. There are still some who give it a go and clearly some who will succeed. But that's how the whole thing seems to work. But now we have a system that is so massively out of control. And as we head towards the that'll be the next totemic figure is out, frankly, of people that have arrived just since Keir Starmer has been Prime Minister. And we said this yesterday. Starmer, I sense, is likely to move more to the left over the next year or so. He's realised that essentially trying to occupy that little bit of sort of what would have been conservative but reform territory, pretending to be strict on stuff, pretending to kind of have views that China, using the speech he did about strangers, which he then kind of redacted from history. It went down the history hole, as it were. All of that, it's gone. And if Starmer has any meaningful chance of success, oddly, he's better going left than right, because he might be able to hoover up some Corbyn votes, but he's not going to be able to hoover up any reform votes. People don't believe Labour on immigration. It's a pointless, it's a futile journey. It's a silly policy. They might as well not have one. It isn't working in any shape or form. So should Labour just give up on immigration? 0344 499 1000. We want your calls on that. The wider issue as well, any other elements you want to throw into the mix, we'll take that too. You might want to talk Donald Trump and Melania arriving at Windsor. It's all very grand stuff. The pomp, the ceremony, it looks $1 billion worth of show for the US president, and that sells well, so well that billions are pouring into the country for the likes of Microsoft and Google as a result of that trade deal. Chloe Dobbs is also with us, political commentator, to talk through the big stories of the day. And let's start, Chloe, with the immigration one. We'll come to Trump in a second. This, of course, was the second deportation flight left Heathrow empty, exposing massive failures on the deal that we've got with France. Activists and lawyers blocking removals, while over 5,000 migrants crossed the Channel in August alone. France has warned the pact could be scrapped entirely. It's worth getting a view on a man who is a little bit more serious on this. Here's what Nigel Farage had to say.
One in, one out. That's what the government told us. For everyone that crosses the Channel, we're going to send them back, and then the French will send us somebody else that's been approved for asylum. Well, flights were booked on Air France. The first flight, would you believe, the lawyers intervened using our old friend, the ECHR, and no one left. The second flight, journalists found out what the plane was. 4 of them, 4 separate media companies booked on the flight, and guess what? All the migrants that were due to go had legal challenges and didn't go. We've sent a plane full of journalists with no migrants whatsoever. And even if the policy worked, one in, one out, and another one in still means +1 for everyone that crosses the Channel. Please do not take seriously anything this government says about dealing with illegal immigration. They're not telling you the truth.
They're not telling us anything, Chloe, really, are they? I mean, it's just a meaningless, it's a sugar show, a charade, as it were.
Well, I mean, we seem to have deported more journalists to France than migrants. I mean, this is just absolutely comical that they can't even get one guy across to France. They are that pathetic. And what they really should do is say, sorry, we're not listening to the ECHR, to say we can't send them to France, which is a safe country, because they're worried about, you know, being beaten up and they're traumatised. They're going to France, OK? They should be able to go back to France. We're just going to ignore the ECHR. France ignores the ECHR. I mean, the terms of this deal are it's very unclear. They haven't made clear to the public exactly what they are. But what would be really funny is if the French start sending us 50 people a week, and if the ECHR gives them flack, they just say, we don't care.
Yeah.
But we don't send anybody back, and we end up having more migrants in Britain.
I mean, it's just incredible,
I mean,
isn't it?
you can't make it up. I mean, every single day is just I mean, the government just makes an absolute laughing stock of itself.
This was, of course, was originally a policy the Tories considered, and I'm told one of the reasons they didn't follow through with it was for exactly what you've just said, because it would be very easy for this bear trap to be stood on, and they've stood on it spectacularly, and so we end up in this, you know, it's humiliating, it's embarrassing. And you just said it there, Chloe, that these people are not being deported to Eritrea or Kathmandu. They're being deported to flipping Paris, for God's sake.
I know.
It's the city of love. I mean,
exactly. I quite like going
to
Paris. I'd quite like a free Air France trip to Paris given to me by the Home Office. I wouldn't mind that. They can send me instead if they like. But it's just absolutely bonkers, and they made other mistakes. Like, why on earth have they decided to do it with a commercial operator rather than just either using a private plane? I mean, probably it's because they only had one person to send. They should have, because they started detaining people over a month ago, and it's meant to be 50 a week. They should have over 200 people to send back, and they could fill up a plane. Yeah. But they haven't got that. They've got one guy.
They only reserved a few dozen seats as well.
Yeah,
well, and no one was on there.
But did they really think that journalists weren't going to end up going on the plane and getting word and going and recording it?
This is what I love about British journalism. Does this stuff really well, because instead of just reporting that, you know, you see, you've got Bob there with his moleskin notebook ready to scribe down the details, and obviously the Home Office are going, well, he's just going to report on it. Bob's going, no, mate, I've booked a ticket, because he wants to see the seats empty. So on he's gone. Some of our guys have gone as well, from the Sun and the like.
And Air France have been absolutely hammered with phone calls and emails by campaigners, charities, lawyers, and Air France are probably thinking, this isn't worth the flack, all of these emails and calls we got to deal with just to get a few quid from the Home Office to take a few people across. So I wouldn't be surprised if Air France pull out of cooperating with this. And I mean, it just shows that this government really can't seem to do anything when it comes to migration. They haven't got the guts to ignore or leave the ECHR. And if they don't do that, they're just going to reach this deadlock with lawyers every single time. I mean, it's just absolutely comical. There's been so much effort put into this deal, which is, I thought, oh, it's worth a shot. It might make a small difference. But if it's going to be this absolute chaos where every single person you detain gets some lefty lawyer, launches a huge legal battle, and then you can't deport them. And there was all this hoo-ha of, oh, can we send them to France whilst they've still got an outstanding legal claim? And Lisa Nandy came out and said, yes, don't worry, the legal claims, they won't be a problem because we can send them to France first. All whilst the deal with the French said, we won't take anybody unless they have no outstanding legal claims. So I was like, hang on, that doesn't add up. They're going to run into trouble here. And sure enough, they have.
And also, just I suppose a PS point to this, Chloe. I don't know whether this is good publicity to Air France, because if you were thinking of getting on an Air France flight and discovered that there may well be somebody on there who's being deported because they have Al-Qaeda sympathies, there might not be the person you want to be travelling with, frankly, in an aeroplane.
No, exactly. And all you need is one story where one member of the public says, oh, I was sat next to some migrant from Afghanistan and they put their hand on my leg inappropriately or something like that. And then that's it. That's terrible press for Air France. So it's a total
at the moment,
shambles.
Yeah, at the moment, any concerned passenger can rest easy because there's no migrants on those planes. So that's where it's at so far. Well,
they were meant to have flights going every single day this week, and they failed Monday, they failed Tuesday, both times just trying to send one person. Apparently they're trying again today. I'm not sure if that has happened yet, but we'll find out.
Let's see what the data shows. Donald Trump, a man who has got a grip on immigration in his own country, has arrived over here. He's called King Charles a long-time friend. Amid Windsor pageantry and trade talks, protests erupted, of course, across London, targeting Trump's controversies. They love a protest. I mean, good Lord, it's not the president of North Korea, it's Donald Trump. Let's have a listen to what the American president said on arrival yesterday.
Well, my relationship is very good with the UK, and Charles, as you know, who's now king, is my friend. And it's the first time this has ever happened where somebody was honored twice, so it's a great honor. And this one's at Windsor. They've never used Windsor Castle for this before. They used Buckingham Palace. And I don't want to say one's better than the other, but they say Windsor Castle is the ultimate, right? So it's going to be nice. But basically up there also on trade, they want to see if they can refine the trade deal a little bit. We made a deal, and it's a great deal. And I'm into helping them. Our country is doing very well. We've never done this well. We're having trillions of dollars coming because of the tariffs. And they'd like to see if they could get a little bit better deal. So we'll talk to them. But primarily it's to be with Prince Charles and Camilla. They're friends of mine for a long time, long before he was king. And it's an honor to have him as king. And, you know, I think he represents the country so well. I've watched. He's such an elegant gentleman, and he represents the country so well.
That was before he took off, of course. The noise in the background, apologies for the noise, that was Melania having her hat sprayed.
Every single time Trump takes questions from the press, you can't hear anything because he's always doing it right next to an airplane.
He's always next to a plane.
Yeah.
Is that deliberate or something? Sometimes he's hanging out the plane as well, isn't he? Just sort of talking before they shut the door. But it was a big do, and you know the images we've seen, it was just something that we are pitch perfect at putting on, right?
Yeah, I mean, just seeing the start of it with all the guards marching around, it is quite the spectacle. I'm feeling patriotic, and it seems like from listening to that Trump is more patriotic than most Brits. He absolutely adores our royal family, and although when Trump normally goes abroad, it's specifically for some sort of trade negotiation or something, and we may have some talk about that between him and Sam whilst he's here. This, for him, this really is a jolly for him. This is a little holiday for him to see Windsor Castle and to see the royal family, and he loves it. And as you said, there have been protests and whatnot, but he's not going to let that stop him.
Everyone always wonders, don't they? What is it like to live a life where you're only ever transported around in beyond first-class luxury, wherever, whether it's a plane, whether it's a helicopter, and then when you get there, they put you in some ornate carriage that has been sort of in the royal history story for hundreds of years, and it's all beautiful and everything smells nice, and then you go into the most luxurious room with a bed that the princess and the pea couldn't have criticised the mattress for. It's got all of that stuff going on, and then there's the banquet, and the food is the best, the wine is the best, everything wherever you go is the best.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll have great stories to tell to his fellow Americans when he gets back home. And you've got to remember, whenever you go to America, their idea of an old building is a 100-year-old building. So when they come to, because it's a very new country, whenever they come to Britain, all the buildings that they see and everything he'll see in Windsor Castle will be so amazing. Whereas here, as Brits, we go into beautiful old churches all the time, and we're quite used to that beautiful old architecture. But for Americans, it's just this amazing spectacle that they're not used to seeing.
It's a bit like you go to Australia. Nothing's more than 250 years old or whatever it is.
It's really odd.
Wow, that's a bit bizarre, really. You know, we've got churches that date back to sort of 900.
Churches in America are so ugly. They've just been put up yesterday.
They're all brand new, aren't they?
Yeah.
They don't have the same ecclesiastical hit as ours do. We are going to look later, as Chloe alluded to there, at the trade deals on this, because they are clearly important, and they've carved one out, apparently. Google and Microsoft throwing billions into the pot. What does that mean? Did they get anything in return for doing that? That is a reasonable question. We'll look at that story as well. Chloe stays with us. More stories coming up. And of course, over to you. Should Labour just give up on immigration? Is it time they just said, look, we can't do this? Which, by the way, their voting base would probably be quite happy with. Thoughts on that as well. And you can leave us a voice note on this number, 0344 499 1000.
I think more than one person has now suggested he cannot survive till the next election as Prime Minister. However, he's already exceeded my predictions, which was even before the election, that he wouldn't last beyond this year's spring local elections. He survived that long, and he probably will survive, actually, until next year's disastrous repeat of those elections, simply because of the structure of the Labour Party and its absence of any real method of getting rid of a serving leader.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. John Cooper in Hertford says, never mind asking should Labour just give up on immigration. I think the quest should be, should Labour just give up on government? Well, that might be a splendid idea, and the way things are going, they may have to. Will this trade deal, or the manifestation of the trade deal that's sort of been trickled down and being announced now and over the next day or so, will that change things significantly? Well, we will watch with interest. Chloe Dobbs is with us looking through the big stories of the day. Let's move to this one, Chloe. Rachel Reeves facing a £40 billion fiscal disaster after productivity forecasts collapse, forcing tax hikes and brutal cuts. Investors are fleeing the UK, branding it an emerging economy, while Reeves scrambles to blame Tory governance instead of owning Labour's failures. Let's have a reminder of Reeves's promise, and it was a promise, to the UK. Here she is.
I'm really clear. I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes. And that is why, at this budget, we did wipe the slate clean.
What the budget in October did was draw a line under the economic and financial mismanagement of the Conservative government. I've now put our public finances in order, so never again will I have to do a budget like I did in October. Our public finances are now on a firm footing. We have now set the public spending envelope for this Parliament. We don't need to come back and ask for more. We've now set that. We're going to do a zero-based review to make sure we get value for money for every pound that taxpayers' money spent. In that budget, I've tried to fix the foundations and wipe the slate clean.
But it's so 1.3% year after next, for example. And that implies, doesn't it, that you're going to have to come back and ask for yet more tax rises?
Absolutely not. We have now set the envelope of spending for this Parliament, and we're going to live within our means.
Oh.
It's just comical, isn't it?
It's really comical. And her and Starmer and Ed Miliband all kind of have the same vocal problem, don't they?
I know, they're all so monotone. I'm convinced they're all robots.
Well, you see.
Not to start any conspiracity theories.
Well, there's a conspiracy theory around this already, you know, that they are all hatched from the same place, the uni party and all that business. I mean, it's not looking good, is it? There's not a lot of money to play with. There's less than she predicted. The black hole is bigger than when she first came to office. This is entirely her fault. It could have gone the other way. There's no one else she can blame now. They're over a year down the line. You can't point to the Tories and say, they did it, they did it. This is on her watch.
I know. I mean, she tried that trick of blaming the Tories' supposed 22 billion black hole for ages, but that's just not going to wash anymore, because the black hole has grown to like double that because of her actions. And every time she thinks she might have just figured out how to balance the books, we then hear, oh, the growth forecasts have been downgraded even more. Rachel Reeves needs to find all this extra money. And the news we're hearing today is that the productivity growth forecasts have been downgraded, and the OBR are consequently saying that means she's going to need to find an extra 9 to 18 billion quid. And that's a chancellor's got to find that, who couldn't even shave 5 billion quid off the welfare bill because of a huge rebellion on the backbenchers, even though they had a huge majority. So I don't see how on earth they're going to save any money anywhere with their crazy backbenchers. I know they tried to discipline them by removing the whip from a few people, but I don't think that's going to get them in line. I think realistically she is going to end up putting up taxes, but that will still only be a short-term fix, because we're in this horrific tax spend fiscal doom loop. where she'll put up taxes. That will mean that businesses will shrink, more people will lose their jobs, more people will flee the country, the growth forecast will be downgraded again. What Labour should have done is they should have started growing the economy first to get tax receipts up before they started throwing cash at things. But now they're stuck in this spiral and they can't seem to get out of it. I think that the budget is really going to be a car crash for her.
I think they are going to unapologetically, I said it over the previous story of immigration, the Starmer, I think, has got to go left now in order to, I think he's got to give up on trying to, somehow nick some Reform supporters or get back some Labour supporters who've gone to Reform. Give up on all of that. His best hope for him personally and his party is to go left. So I think...
Well, that might happen if they do topple him and we end up with the Labour members' favourite Ed Miliband.
Well,
I would hate that. I think it would be awful, but maybe it would help Labour. I mean, it's been really difficult for Labour to figure out what their strategy and their messaging should be.
But
because they are losing votes in all directions. They're losing votes to the Greens, to now the Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana party, and to Reform as well. Like, they're going to lose a lot of seats in the Red Wall.
But that's why I think he's got to make a decision. And that would allow him to come up with one of these wealth tax things. You've got people like Gary Economics and Dale Vince who are saying, this wealth on assets of 10 million, I think it is. That's tricky. The asset tax is tricky because you could have 10 million quid's worth of property and no income. It's possible.
Yeah, I mean, I don't...
So you'd have to say, I'm not supporting it.
I think if they try and do a big tax on the rich, if they go left, then people on the left might like the sound of that. But I don't think in reality it's going to raise the cash that they want it to.
No,
Otherwise,
it won't.
they would have done it already.
Well, you think
people will
surely
move
they would have done
their money around, people will leave the country, as they've already started doing.
What about this? A final one. Too many young people are getting out of the habit of what? Working.
What a surprise.
Now, you would still be classed, Chloe, as a young person.
I know.
And
I do work,
you work very hard.
I'm not on any benefits.
No, you're not. And you work, in the day, you work in the evenings, depending on what you're doing.
Never ends.
You do all sorts. Pat McFadden prioritises helping young people find jobs with nearly 1 million neither working nor studying.
Yeah, so what Pat McFadden is trying to do is basically sort of reverse engineer a reduction in the benefits bill, because he knows after that huge rebellion on the welfare bill, where they were just, as I said before, trying to cut $5 billion off, make a few little tweaks, the backbenchers went insane. So he's recognised, OK, we're not going to manage to change the rules anytime soon, so we need to do something else that convinces young people to get off of these benefits and get back into work. Now, how exactly he's going to do that, that is not very clear. Because at the moment you've got so many young people, millions of them, who are on universal credit without any requirement to go and search for work, which is absolutely shocking. And once they're written off like that, they just stay on benefits for life. So I know the benefits bill each year is huge, but if you think how much is this person going to cost the state if they get on benefits at the age of 20 and stay on it for life, it's huge.
Massive. And is it going to change, or what will make it change? There's also a story today, which we didn't get around to, but of young people who are not leaving the house. It's like, what was it, Finn? A 25% increase on young people, not Gen Zers, not leaving the house.
But in COVID, they all got in the habit. They all got in the habit of online working and thought, this is great. I don't have to commute. I can be a bit lazy with my work and all of this. But apparently, I can't remember which paper it was in a week or two ago. Apparently, there's been some polling done which is actually saying that Gen Z are now wanting to go back to the office because they're actually starting to get a bit lonely being stuck indoors all day. So maybe it's going to move in the opposite direction.
Some of them are so hermit-like, when shown a photograph of a front door, they didn't know what it was.
I highly doubt your sources on that, Ian.
I've slightly invented.
Well, they have to go to the front door for all of their Amazon deliveries that they get. Well, this is another. I'm totally guilty of this, and I got in the habit of this during lockdown.
You don't do Deliveroo.
I don't do Deliveroo, no.
You've never ordered a takeaway meal?
I have, but I haven't done it for years.
Okay.
I did it a few times at uni, but.
Finn's disgusted as a fellow Gen Zer. He's disgusted. Listen, Chloe, thank you.
No worries.
Chloe Dobbs with us on the programme. Over to you on that central question. Should Labour give up on immigration? I mean, it looks like they've given up. Should they just come out and say it? Do you know what? We can't make this work. In fact, everyone's welcome. Is that the answer to their problems? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one from Tony says, not unreasonably, why does everyone keep referring to lefty lawyers? The term should just be lawyers. I've been saying this for years, but no one is listening. The lawyers have infiltrated all aspects of public life, the courts, politics and our daily lives. They write the laws causing our problems, then exploit them to make loads of money until their power is curbed. Not much will change. We'll be speaking to a lawyer in just a bit on this. I mean, the lawyers say, well, look, we just interpret the law. The law is there, and it's for us to find our way around it in order to defend a client. Whether you like the cut of their jib or the particular nature of the client is kind of irrelevant to all of this. We just do the law. If you don't like it, get the law changed. So we could, I suppose, ultimately blame our political masters over there in Westminster. This, of course, is the story of the second deportation flight that did leave Heathrow, by the way, but no one was on it. Well, a few people going back to France were on it. This, of course, has exposed the failure of the UK-France returns deal. Activists and lawyers blocked removals, while over 5,000 migrants have so far, well, in the month of August, over 5,000 crossed the Channel. France has warned that the pact could be scrapped entirely, and I think anyone who's looking at this story closely will probably say that's where the smart money is. We will speak to Joseph Cottery-Monson, human rights lawyer, in just a moment. First, Henry Bolton, international border control expert. Henry, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would take a punt that none of this particularly surprises you.
Not at all, Ian. Not in the slightest bit. I was saying it before, or as the thing was being discussed and negotiated, once it had been agreed, but before it was implemented, I was pointing out where the problems would lie. And indeed, I've been, I think, spot on. We've had two flights. The first one was supposed to have 6 people on board, as I understand it. The second one, 8. Neither or both flights took off without any returnees on board. And indeed, in the UK, it's being widely reported that the problem here is legal challenges. That's in part correct. And just to cover that, so if there is an outstanding claim that's been made in the UK that one of these people has been is a victim of human trafficking or of torture or anything like that, then they can't be sent back can't be returned to France. Right. So what is happening now is that within the UK has to submit all the paperwork within or no later than 72 hours before the individual travels back to France. So if within that 72 hours an individual or their legal representation makes a claim that they've been trafficked, then it's too late to submit the paperwork to France, sort of talking about this, and the thing has to be put on hold. So fundamentally, the design of the agreement is flawed. There's a loophole there. The second thing is that in France, the argument is that actually the UK isn't providing them with enough paperwork anyway. So the UK under the agreement is required to do sort of due diligence into the individual's medical condition, their welfare condition, mental health condition, into whether or not they have been subject to torture or trafficking. It's a whole load of things. And we're supposed to do due diligence and demonstrate to the French with 72 hours before we send these people back that there's no problem and that they're no risk to the French either. But of course, if you've got, Bloggins who's come from, a rural village in, I don't know, Somalia or Sudan or somewhere, he may have documentation, but you still don't know anything about this individual's background. And really, you can't do the full checks that are required by this agreement. So the whole thing is flawed. It's flawed. The concept, it's badly conceived, badly designed. And of course, as a result, it can't be implemented. One thing about that you said just now about the legal sort of thing and the laws are constructed badly, the lawyers are saying, they're right. Of course, they can't find loopholes if there aren't any loopholes. And we've had a succession of acts of parliament: the Immigration Act 1971, the Asylum and Immigration Act 1999, the Nationality and Borders Act 2022, the Illegal Migration Act 2023. Then you've got the ECHR. You've got a plethora of these acts of parliament. And when I've helped other countries to address sort of border management and immigration and all sorts of threats on their borders, one of the first things that I've invariably found is that you need to consolidate all of your border-related legislation into one, ideally one, Act of Parliament. So you've tightened it up. You don't create a layer upon layer and and stick your finger in the dike over here and another finger in the dike over there with multiple pieces of legislation. What you've got to do is consolidate it all, and then you can close all the loopholes. You deal with the thing, and it's all up to date. As I say, some of our legislation goes back sort of 40, 50 years, 60 years in some cases. So it is a point, and it's back down to poor leadership and lack of knowledge as to how to deal with this within Westminster and Whitehall, for that matter. And
I suppose even allowing for this, this curious deal that was struck with France, and as you'll be more aware than me, Henry, this deal has been around for some years as a possibility. The Tories considered it for about half an hour and then decided not to run with it, perhaps because of these pitfalls and obvious areas where it could fall at the first hurdle. But overarchingly, it was massively in France's favour.
Yeah, well, in France's favour, the British government for years now, 2 decades at least, has had the idea that when we try to negotiate something, we don't look at what we're trying to achieve particularly. We look at it's a bizarre sort of framing. They try to look at what will the other party, in this case the French, agree to, because what they don't want to do is enter into negotiations and find that they fail. Well, that means that you're actually negotiating something that the other side is going to find perfectly convenient and easygoing. And we've had that problem throughout the whole Brexit negotiation process and various negotiations in all sorts of fields, whether it's trade, whether it's security, for 2 decades or more. I've watched it happen, and it's painful to watch it. And our partners think, and I've worked in the diplomatic field for 20, 25 years at ambassadorial and level and with ministers. And they're looking at us and going, what has happened to the United Kingdom? There was a time when you came to the negotiating table, you knew precisely what you wanted, you knew precisely how to get it. And now, we ask you what you want and you haven't got a clue. And that's the problem. We just haven't got any vision here. One final thing that's probably worth saying is that when we come to borders, we ought to look at the whole range of threats as well, because the French are increasingly doing that. It's not just about individual people. It's about the cocaine and the heroin, which is coming across the channel as well, a lot of it. And the French are concerned that, again, we're not addressing that. And that pulls it through the British market, pulls these things through France and Europe. And they don't like it, and rightly so, because a lot of it stops off en route. We are driving criminality by our failure to deal with this robustly. There needs to be a clear decision.
Indeed. And I guess just a final point, Henry, just to go back to the specifics of this this Anglo-French deal. What I suppose is daunting, to say the least, daunting for Keir Starmer, is that the people that they selected for deportation would have been the ones that they thought had the very best chance of France agreeing to. And of course, if those people failed, then there's a not unreasonable suggestion that there's not much hope of anyone else ever getting on one of those Air France planes.
I think yes, you're right, but they're looking at the individual. They're not looking at what the legal representation is doing behind that. And again, there are a lot of lawyers and charities who are funding legal action and legal charities who are actually because they don't, at a principle ideology, if you like, they are seeking ways to undermine these efforts to return people. And when you do, so they will always be active, even if the individual themselves is even maybe sort of kind of ambivalent towards being returned to France. Yeah. Then these people will, in any case, try to find one. And now I've heard today. Now I can't corroborate this, that they're even now trying to claim that these people going back to France will be destitute because France doesn't support them as well as we do. And therefore, that's a reason not to send them back. So this whole thing, unless we are incredibly robust, unless the government makes a very, very clear policy decision that these people will go back no matter what and drive that effort, then this is not going to end.
On that point, Henry, thank you, sir. Henry Bolton, International Border Control expert. Let's get a word from Joseph Cottery-Monson, human rights lawyer. Joseph, good to have you on with us again. This is interesting, isn't it? I said at the beginning, look, I mean, people talk about lefty lawyers and blaming lawyers, and yeah, that's quite a fun parlour game for everybody to have a go at. Who doesn't want to have a pop at a lawyer, whether they're a conveyancer or a human rights lawyer for that matter? But you take the point. However, if there is a fundamental flaw, then the anger should be aimed at the law of the land and governments. Would that be a point we could both agree on?
If you don't like it, change it. And what people often find is that when they think through the consequences, as the politicians, Ian, that they elect or they've elected find out when they realise the consequences of change, changes might seem more attractive until you have to pick and choose. You realise you can't pick and choose.
I mean, this is the pick and choose point. This is a mess at the moment, isn't it?
Well, it's a mess, like every bit of populist policy that we've seen.
I mean, it's not really populist, is it? I mean, it's just kicking people out of the country who shouldn't be here. I mean, if you can't do that, if you can't do that as a country, something's gone horribly wrong. And deporting them to France, not Eritrea or Sudan.
We're at the risk of really not wanting to sound patronising to someone who I have great respect for. Well, there's a process, isn't there, right? And saying that we're kicking out people who should be out of here, we've got a process. That process is governed by laws. You're right that there are laws that affect whether something can happen or not, and if you don't like them, you can change them. But I tell you what, this ECHR bashing, these are basic rights that we afford to people born out of the abuses and the deaths of tens of millions of people across Europe alone in the Second World War. They're there for a reason, and they're not extravagant things. I have to say, I was impressed.
Laws can change, though, can't they?
Yeah, they can.
I mean, they can be fit for context and purpose at one time, and they sometimes need modifying.
That's your right. But when you're talking about something as simple as the right to life, the right not to be tortured, do we really want that fundamental principle to change?
We're not going to get tortured in France, are they? I mean, if you get on a flight, an Air France flight from this country to Paris, you'll be having a croissant and taking in the can by 6 o'clock. I mean, this is not Kathmandu. Come on, let's be honest
wonderfully put, Ian. You're entertaining me today. So you're right, but I think this business of, and I was about to say, Henry Bolton, impressed with the guy, 8 years as a police officer, great respect, police constable, doing it the hard way, and has done a great deal in terms of border control, and all of that is well documented. But I have to pick up on what I might charitably say, and hopefully not too cruelly, was a bit of lazy reading of the Telegraph article that I suspect that we've both read regarding the deportation of an Eritrean migrant, which is the only one that has been blocked in respect of that so far, not multiple. And he's a 25-year-old, and his lawyers have got a temporary injunction on the basis that he might be left destitute on the specific facts, not that all of a sudden the law is saying destitution and being poor or not as well off, all which I think are kind of
how would he be left?
Fun.
I mean, maybe you could explain it to me. How would he be left? He'd be sent to France, for goodness' sake. He's not being sent back to Eritrea.
I don't know.
Not that we're at war with Eritrea, by the way, but nonetheless.
No, I don't know, and neither do you. What's the specifics of his situation in terms of the possibility of a...
You could hazard a guess, and I could hazard a guess.
I don't know. I mean,
this is a lawyer trying it on, Joseph. You know that. And if you're a lawyer and you're getting paid bundles, I almost don't blame you.
Well, I'm not a human rights lawyer, although I didn't take the mistake from you as a disservice. They do great work.
Okay.
People in law adopting, I should say, for the purposes of my colleagues, I'm a fantastic criminal defence lawyer at Marymount and solicitors. But the reality is that
criminals need human rights too.
Yeah, and I think that we all need human rights, and I think the fact is that it's the human rights of the person that you don't like that must be defended the most, because if not, you might be next. Now, as far as the specific facts of that individual are concerned, we just don't know. But it's not a decision. And we mustn't talk about these things as if this is the outcome. It's a temporary injunction in respect of the very first attempt. And we just don't know what the outcome's going to be.
OK, but would you agree, Joseph?
Let me say this. The purpose, and I won't be long, but the purpose of an injunction, or the purpose of an interim order in this case, is not to decide the matter. It's to allow a judge the time to consider it, allow both sides to put evidence together. And didn't we hear, quite rightly from Henry Bolton, this 3-day deadline thing is way too rushed anyway. There isn't time to go into all of this stuff. They're hastily putting it together. And it's a natural consequence of that there has to be a delay, because the government, for populist reasons, is trying to compress something that is about people's lives, people who we know at the very least have come a very long way.
And there's a lot of other people's lives as well here. The taxpayer that has to fund all of this. We're in a place where
of these people,
we're talking
Ian,
billions of pounds.
I tell you what, Ian,
4 people are funding.
let me say this. 2/3 of these people, as a result of court proceedings and a process which is governed by law using our judiciary, are judged to be, by the end of that process, and the statistics are there, it's the government's own statistics, Ian, judged to be genuine asylum seekers.
And you know how easy it is to circumnavigate that system, because it's the thing you can't disprove. You say to a judge, Joseph, this person's been trafficked. You say to a judge, this person's changed their religion. You say to a judge, this person can't go back to Iran or whatever because they've become a Christian. Nobody can disprove any of that. So erring on the side of caution.
Judges don't operate on the basis.
What else can they operate on? If you're a lawyer and you say, here's my client, he came over from Iran, unfortunately he became a Christian. If he goes back, they're going to hang him by the neck in the streets, or he's gay. So you can't disprove that. And as a lawyer, that would be the first line of defense. What do you think the
likelihood of somebody fleeing Iran, realistically, somebody fleeing Iran, one of the worst regimes in the world, that you and I would give the shirts off our back and everything we owned not to be deported
but that's not an immigrant. You've just let the cat out the bag. You've let the cat out the bag. You don't like where you live.
You make a point, you let me ask, and you don't let me get to the end of it. Please allow me to do that. You know, the reality is that the proportion of the people who come from certain countries who are genuine asylum seekers, because just the act of fleeing makes it impossible for them to return, because we know what those places are like. There might be other examples, I think we probably would both agree, where it's more of a grey area. But Ian, Iran, that ain't the example. These are places that
because you don't like your country is not a reason to say I should be able to go anywhere else.
Well, with respect, it depends on
I don't like this one quite often. But I don't think I've got a right to go and live anywhere else. Listen, Joseph, we have to stop there. I'm not cutting in, but thank you, sir, for your time. Joseph Cotry-Monson, he's not a human rights lawyer, but he is a lawyer of some note, and he knows that area backwards too. Thank you to him. Over to you, 0344 499 1000.
think more than one person has now suggested he cannot survive till the next election as Prime Minister. However, he's already exceeded my predictions, which was even before the election, that he wouldn't last beyond this year's spring local elections. He survived that long, and he probably will survive, actually, until next year's disastrous repeat of those elections, simply because of the structure of the Labour Party and its absence of any real method of getting rid of a serving leader.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. This comes from Susan, who says, would the patronising lawyer like to take a bet on whether or not the Eritrean will be returned? Genuine asylum seekers, many of them lie through their teeth. He might have a qualification to be a lawyer, but he's completely delusional, if not a bit thick. So sick of these lawyers. They work against the British people, says Susan. I have to say, legally, in defence of Joseph, he's a lawyer. That is his job. He's also a very nice man. On top of all of that, yes, you can work your way around this stuff. I mean, I think the cat came out the bag at the end there by saying, would you want to live in Iran? No, I wouldn't. But that's not the issue, is it? It's not like, oh, I have a claim for asylum because I don't like the government. That's not how it works, but that is how it's been working. This'll be Joan in Sunderland. How you doing, Joan?
I'm all right. I'm still trying to get my head around how a Prime Minister who is a human rights lawyer and an Attorney General who is a human rights lawyer can get this one in and one out plan so wrong. And we've had an appeal judge who's given an interim verdict to an asylum seeker who can't be deported to France because he'll be made destitute. These two, I think, could set up a legal practice. I can just see the brass plate on the door.
Yeah.
Bodgett and Scarpa.
I like it. I love your thinking on this, Joan.
Attorneys at law. And I cannot understand. I think somebody's making a new carry-on film with these characters.
Well, all they're doing is, I mean, it's look, I know there's going to be a lot of lawyers, Joan, say that, people like you and I are just, we don't know enough about it, so we're just guessing. The one thing we do know about it is there are certain sort of irredeemable realities and facts around this, and that is that if you are to suggest that you were trafficked, if you were to suggest that you are gay, so therefore could not possibly be returned to an Islamic country, if you were to suggest that you had changed religion, if you were to suggest you were trans, any of these things are complete. It's impossible to prove they are not the case. Now, if I was a lawyer and I did that for a living, I would be jumping on that every day of the week, right? You'd be going, yeah, my client, here he is. He's comes from a Muslim country, can't go back because he's turns out he's gay. That would absolutely be my defence to try and stop this man from getting deported. Yeah,
but sometimes I wonder whose side these lawyers are on. Talk about the enemy within. I don't want people who are genuinely refugees to have things denied, but these aren't genuine refugees, and you don't have to be Einstein to see that.
And do you know what? Listen, Joan, I've got to move, but on that point, thank you very much indeed. The other thing I was going to factor into that, and I did begin to try and nibble into this argument with Joseph, the lawyer, and that is that, this idea of human rights, I think the idea of protecting the rights of British taxpayers and pensioners and people who haven't got a lot of money, and the money they have got, those tax pounds, that are thrown into a multi-billion-pound pot that is paying for other people to come from another country, whatever the reason might be, by the way. That is not an inconvenient fact. That shouldn't be left on the side as a bit of an annoying little kind of, oh, we'll discuss that in any other business. It's huge. It's massive. It's a huge, absolute intrinsic factor to this story. People, poor people in this country are paying for it. We'll get the news headlines back after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed the Afternoon Empire. Good afternoon and welcome to the home of common sense. As we've been discussing, Keir Starmer and the UK's Anglo-French deportation plan in disarray. Legal challenges and protests continue to block those flights. Remember, 5,000 people came across the Channel in boats just last month. We're now heading towards the totemic 60,000 since Keir Starmer's been Prime Minister. We can't deport a single one of these people. It's beyond extraordinary. Even a mad left-winger would acknowledge that, surely. Details on that. And we're asking the question, should Labour just give up on an immigration policy? Is it time they just went, you know what, this is not in our DNA, mate, to do this. We can't make this work. We don't actually care. So let's leave it to the next lot. Also this afternoon, the King and the Queen have welcomed Donald and Melania Trump to Windsor Castle for their second UK state visit. That's never happened before. They arrived by Marine One. They were greeted by the Prince and Princess of Wales before a grand carriage procession through the Windsor estate. Donald Trump grinning like a 13-year-old. He looked so happy and as if he was in his, almost his rightful place. He loves this kind of stuff and we laid it on beautifully for him. And the Work and Pension Secretary, Pat McFadden, focuses on getting nearly 1 million young people back to work, ruling out welfare reform for a year, with sickness benefits claims soaring. He highlights the mental health payments, the mental health benefits of employment. Well, he's right on that, but making it work is an entirely different thing. We'll have more coming up later. 0344 499 1000 is where you'll find us. I want to move straight into this story, the UK-US tech prosperity deal. This is worth an awful lot of money, securing 31 billion quid's worth of investments, including Microsoft's 22 billion AI supercomputer and others that have got the green light to go ahead. Google and CoreWeave adding billions for AI research and energy efficient data centers, boosting innovation and growth in this country. Let's speak to Deepesh Patel, editor-in-chief of Trade Treasury Payments magazine. Deepesh, good afternoon to you, sir.
Afternoon.
Nice to have you with us. Look, this is obviously great news. We've got a whole load of money coming this way. It creates jobs. The question that rattled in my head when I first saw this, and I was rather reminded of when Apple almost kind of permanently moved into Ireland. They seemed to be so prolific out there, and we all scratched our head and thought, wow, I mean, it's great that Apple are in Ireland. What are they doing there? Well, it turned out they were paying about 1p in every trillion in tax. That's what got them there. Would there have been a sweetener to get a trade deal like this?
Yeah, I mean, look, interesting and good afternoon. UK isn't offering those kind of Irish-style tax haven rates. I mean, you know, Starmer's government have been opting for lighter AI regulation versus the EU. That could quite possibly be the attraction. I mean, I think the real item here is that, you know, you're attracting infrastructure investment, skilled workforce, and really establishing the UK as a finance hub. And just going back to those numbers that you mentioned earlier, $42 billion. It's a good amount of money. The US tech investment into the UK that's been announced during the visit, it's been anchored around artificial intelligence, quantum computing, civil, nuclear, and digital infrastructure. And I think it's important to note that, you know, all of these firms, Microsoft, Nvidia, as you mentioned, 120,000 GPUs committed, Google, £5 billion, including that Waltham Cross data center, and many more. It really anchors this point for two-way value chains and establishes the value of multilateral partnership between the UK and the US. I mean, we've been at there's the WTO Public Forum going on right now, and world leaders are gathered to talk trade. And look, this is a good example of what's going on in the US and multilateral partnership.
And of course, there's a couple of things we do rather well over here. Finance is obviously a huge part of our kind of economic infrastructure. And tech as well. We're kind of, you know, ahead of the game of many other equivalent economies in that respect. So this is a nice kind of synergy in both of those areas.
Yeah, that's right. No, tech. It's a good synergy. I think that the tech partnership is critical, and let's focus on artificial intelligence there because the UK has opted for a slightly more lenient form of regulation than the US and Europe. But I think what we've also got to remember is we've got to be careful about artificial intelligence. I'm sure you may have seen this morning that the World Trade Organization's flagship publication, the World Trade Review, you know, warns about the dangers of artificial intelligence, and actually the fact that it's important to ensure that we level the playing field for artificial intelligence. And what leaders really should be thinking about is how are we enabling AI for greater good, whether it's on trade deals, whether it's sovereignty of data, etc. So all this tech investment is all very well, but for our readers at Trade Treasury Payments, what they're really thinking about is how do we ensure that AI is an enabler for good?
Yeah, I was about to say, I mean, this is probably a conversation we better having over a pint, Deepesh, rather than over the radio. But you take my point on this, that there are many people that go, well, I mean, these data centers, you know, I was reading the other day that Mark Zuckerberg in the States has essentially bought a desert to build one. I mean, these things are as big as you can imagine. You'll be more familiar with this than me. And there are many people that unreasonably go, well, what do we need all that for? Well, what's the purpose of this whole AI thing? Yeah, it's fun to make a few funny memes about your colleagues, and oh look, you can impose a photograph of your Auntie Maureen sitting on top of a Christmas tree at Christmas. You can do all of that great stuff. In terms of moving us forward, we already exist in a digital space. Technology is mind-blowing from where it was even a decade ago. What's this next step all about? Do we need to be scared?
Well, I think we should talk about nuclear and why now. So the Atlantic Partnership for Nuclear Energy has been signed, and the licensing has been cut from 3 to 4 years to around 2 years. And actually, a massive number of projects have been announced from X-Energy and Centrica, with 12 AMRs in Hartlepool, outside of London, Holtec and EDF and Tritax, the SMR campus in Cottam. And I think the political rhetoric here is we are in this kind of golden age of nuclear, and we're really needing that to drive some of the energy required for this data and AI revolution. It's also geostrategic, right? We're ending our reliance on nuclear, Russian nuclear by 2028, and for the UK, I guess this is all about energy sovereignty, and I guess this is important for the financing element, because we now need to think of new capital structures. We need to think about longer term project and infrastructure finance deals, and those longer tail supply chain opportunities, because as soon as some of these new deals and these new supply chains are being reorientated, we need to think now about how the banks are financing those corporates on those longer term deals with new countries, with new corporates, etc., to fund the data or the energy, and then the data of the future.
And just finally, Deepesh, you've got your ear to the ground on these things. It's clearly your job. What else are we hearing in terms of what could be coming our way in terms of trade deals? I mean, this is the kind of tech stuff. Is there anything else coming around the corner you can imagine? Any other areas that we should keep our eye on?
Well, I think we should shift our attention to what's going on in the APEC and ASEAN region. I mean, I've just come back from Singapore at a whole raft of trade conferences just 2 weeks ago, and actually the rhetoric there is all around global value and global regional integration, and the idea that yes, multilateralism or great unilateralism is a bit of a threat at the moment, and actually the idea of trading blocks forming and formalizing their trade agreements is an important consideration, and actually how we adapt to those is important, because we need to think about supply chain resilience, supply chain security, and especially when you think about the complexity of various supply chains that involve critical materials, we need to think about what the deals look like on those trading blocks. So I think we're going to be seeing more of that ASEAN and Asia Pacific integration. I also think we've got to look out for the South-South. I mean, open question as to what that means for the UK and how the UK plays that either with the US, Europe, or other trading partners down south. Yeah, and
just a final point on that point, actually, in terms of how well we do in kind of trade, getting ahead of the game, of course, which is key to everything. You mentioned Singapore. We know how those guys roll. I mean, they don't hang around when it comes to progress. They know what they're doing. They've obviously got a lot behind them as well. How do we fare in that kind of league table of being, almost hungry enough at the right point to make sure we are fully involved and interconnected with everything that's needed to make us the successful economy we need to be?
Well, I think we need to cut the red tape. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of rhetoric. We're good at making a song and dance when actors enter into the UK. I think what we've got to really think about, I guess three things. We've got to anchor our supply chains, and we've got to think about how these future technologies, artificial intelligence, nuclear supply chains, etc., are formed. But also think about the financing behind that. We need to think about these new golden rules for trade in the future. I was with the Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce, John Denton, the other week, and he said uncertainty is the costliest tariff, and actually multilaterals need to not miss the backbone there. And I guess we've got to talk about tax breaks, but I think we've got to think about the real drivers for FDI, foreign direct investment, and those trade deals. It's not just about regulatory agility, but it's also about the workforce, infrastructure, and having that in place to kind of cement the UK for a prosperous future.
Great to have you on, Deepesh. Thank you, sir. Really nice to speak. Deepesh Patel with us on the programme. 0344 499 1000. Let's go back to your calls. John's in Cornwall. John, how are you doing?
I'm fair to middling, Ian.
Good. What have you got for us?
Well, it's the sheer lunacy of all this latest thing about the one in, one out immigration. What people don't realise is what happened 100 years ago is going to happen again. And people have had enough. They've had enough. And when the slaughter starts, it'll be the fault of the government, the wokes and the lawyers, because it cannot continue like it is. 100 years ago, it swept across Europe. It's sweeping across Europe and this country now, and people have to take responsibility for their actions. And when that does happen, when the slaughter starts, because it's like watching grass grow. You can't sit in your garden and watch grass grow. It happens slowly, very slowly, slowly, slowly. And when that happens, some of these politicians are going to have to take, and the wokes and the lawyers are going to have to take responsibility for the sadness that follows. Yeah?
Do you think this government should give up on trying because they've failed at every single level so far and they're failing again, John?
Yeah, well, they should. And also, I mean, you look what's happened in France with Macron. He's a nobody now in France.
Yeah.
And why don't we just cut the border off, full stop, and say we don't want to be part of the EU, we don't want to be part of anything to do with that, and we want to run our own country. Yeah?
Well, I mean, we're not technically part of the EU, of course, but there's still some agreements, as you've obviously highlighted there, where Starmer, maybe other governments, I don't know, think it's to our advantage. I don't know why we can't solve what... I'm not suggesting it's the work of a moment, but why we can't solve nearly 60,000 people coming into our country. I mean, doesn't that seem odd?
Well, 100, yes, it is. But if you look at history repeating itself, 100 years ago, it was the Bolsheviks versus the brown shirts in Germany, and it swept across Europe, and where it led to. Because if you pee the people off enough, then I know lots and lots of very good, they were less voting people, voted for Labour, and they've turned their backs because they've said the only people disadvantaged in this country are the elderly and the children, because money doesn't grow on trees. And why should British people who have contributed all their lives be then refused help, and their families refused, pure and simply? And when that person was on earlier, that lawyer, and he was saying about the ECH, but that was set up after the war and supported by...
Yeah, he was kind of 50, he was talking in the language of 50 years ago when, obviously, nobody suggests we shouldn't have any rights enshrined, but you don't have to keep dining out on this thing that was set up post-war that somehow is meant to have the same relevance today as it did back then. I mean, this is sort of the language of the nut job, frankly. John, you've been great. Thank you very much indeed. Mark in West Sussex this afternoon. Ian, how can any illegal migrant claim they've been trafficked after handing over 2,000 quid for a place on a dinghy? They are willing participants. It's a fair point. Michael in Norfolk, there is an easy way. Cut the number of immigrants, remove all of the incentives. And I come back to the point as well that John just raised there, which is about who pays for all of this. Who pays for the 7 million quid a day, this is the hotel bill, and the multiple billions that this is costing over the course of any given year? And that is not just the accommodation bill, it is also the NHS, it's also other elements of our services. That could be schools, certainly housing. I mean, the list goes on. People have to pay for that. So for every person that comes into this country, yet again, the government have to go cap in hand to the taxpayer. And the taxpayer is mostly made up of people who are not rich. It's invariably made up of people who are certainly not rich. And many of those people will be in the category of being pretty poor, just living by the day, but they still pay tax. And many of those people have not got a decent roof over their own head, and many of those people struggle to buy food. And yet they are the people that are being asked to pay and act in a sort of benevolent fashion for people coming across the channel. Where is the human rights of the British taxpayer in all of this? That's not a mischievous question. That's not some right-wing kind of riposte to the dilemma. That's a genuine, I hope, pretty savvy, sort of intelligent point to make in this debate. Poor people are footing the bill for this. 0344 499 1000.
Birdie tells me that number 10 have been trying to keep quite a tight lid on the number of questions that will be asked.
Funny that.
Donald Trump, he's a pretty freewheeling guy, but he is also the guest here. Normally, when he hosts these sort of press conferences on his home turf in the Oval Office or in the East Wing of the White House, he takes a lot of questions, and he doesn't have a sort of pre-selected list like Starmer likes to have of he knows what's coming, and he's much more of a free for all.
Yeah.
I suspect they're going to meet somewhere in the middle there.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Don't go away, Chris, with you in just a second. Let's get a voice note on that big immigration debacle from this government. Here it is from Kevin.
Good afternoon, Ian. I think this with the migrants and all the borders and everything, I really think they need to get Tony Blair back and get all this lot undone. He caused all this. He's tied everything up so we couldn't undo it now. So I think he should be dragged back kicking and screaming and be forced to undo it all. If he doesn't, throw him in the slammer where he belongs. He deserves to be in there anyway.
Stick Tony Blair in jail. Well, that may not be a bad thing on a number of levels. Who knows? Thank you very much, Kevin, for that. This comes in from Mike, who says there's no simple solution to the immigration problem. However, the Schengen Agreement is helping it. If the EU temporarily reintroduced borders, it would help with the flow of people and boats. Yeah, and this, of course, is a problem right across the European continent. This is not exclusive to us. There are countries where there are phone-in radio and TV programs going on right now, probably having this same conversation. Some have tried to tighten it up a little bit, notably Germany, of all places, have opened their doors to welcome anyone who cared to come in. It's a sort of madness, Merkel moment back in the day. Let's go to Chris in Bournemouth. What have you got for us, Chris? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Hi, yep. What are your thoughts?
I am sick to death of these human rights lawyers that are screaming out with these people on their in their people that they're trying to protect. You said it just before the break.
Yep.
What about human rights of the British people? What about the human rights of all the soldiers that have fought for this country and are now living in tents and everywhere else because they cannot get help from the government?
Yep.
And we are paying for this out of our tax money. And I think we should rebel against this and say, well, if that's what you're going to spend the tax money on, then we don't pay any tax.
I mean, it can't go on, can it? I mean, the reality is the numbers we're talking about here are eye-watering. They're beyond telephone numbers, Chris. It's not. It doesn't make you cruel or unkind to say this can't continue. It is simply. I keep saying that the best argument should be the economic one, the one we're trying to have here, because it's the most persuasive. It's the most one. It's the most glaring and obvious argument or point to begin the debate, but it sort of gets ignored. Nobody's really talking about it with any seriousness.
No, they're not. One thing I hope comes out of this visit from Donald Trump, and when he meets Keir Starmer tomorrow, is that Donald Trump turns around to Keir Starmer and says, don't you think it's about time you sat back and listened to the people of your country?
Yeah. You'd think it would want something like that, wouldn't it? Because whatever people say about Trump, and he's got a massive load of flaws, we all know that. But on immigration, certainly how it's looking right now, he's making it work. No one's hopping over that border anymore.
No. And if we implemented some of the things that he's done in the States, we wouldn't have this problem either.
Yeah.
One thing we should do is shut down our borders.
For some reason, that seems to be beyond the capability of any government. Listen, Chris, I'm going to move just to get more comments on. Thank you very much indeed for that. Just a quick point on the data centres and these big tech deals. Cliff in Berkshire says, great news about the data centres and tech investments. My question is, where is the power for it coming? They need lots of electricity, not to mention water, to keep them operational. That they only exist. Cliff is absolutely right. They only exist, these data centres, with a shed ton of water and energy. That's almost the thing that keeps them alive, which is why our previous guest, Deepesh, from the tech trade magazine that we spoke with, made the point that nuclear power is key to this, because one can't really exist without the other. Nick's in Northampton. What have you got for us, Nick? Afternoon to you.
Yeah, good afternoon. Right, you heard about this one out, one in, and all the human rights lawyers.
Yes.
We pay the charities. We pay a subsidy to charities through taxpayers' money. Anybody who's supporting the migrants, stop all the taxpayers' money. Stop all the money to the lawyers from taxpayers' accounts, because we can't get legal aid. But yet, taxpayers pay for the human rights lawyers.
We pay right the way through this entire system. I mean, it is criminal how this works, and in all manner of respects.
Yeah, and I think, if I remember right, it was Hungary that made immigration lawyers illegal. You are not allowed to have immigration lawyers in that country.
Is that a fact? Or, I mean, it's a beautiful anecdote. I wonder if that is factual. We will check that out, because I can see why the temptation would be to say, sorry, these people are making a lot of mischief, frankly. Nick, thank you very much indeed for that. We will look into that. Let's get a voice note on this issue. This is Lee in Leeds.
I'm afraid I can't give any sympathy or merit for Keir Starmer and the Labour government on this, because they are all lawyers at the top. Isn't the new Home Office Minister an ex-lawyer? And therefore they should know that this was never going to be possible. And therefore, if they did know that this was never going to be done, then they're just trying to show that they're doing something, and they are absolutely not.
And Lee, thank you very much for that. The crazy thing about the kind of one in, one out thing is that even if it's possible, it's still ridiculous. because it doesn't work on a number of levels. It doesn't work in that the numbers are so small, you wouldn't even be touching the sides of addressing the problem. So there's that. But of course, mathematically, even when it is working, it still gives you the same amount of people in the country, because it's, by definition, it's one out, one in. I don't know what genius thought this was a good idea. And of course, if the one comes in and the one doesn't go out, plus the one that's crossing the channel at the time, in fact, it's made it worse. So you have more immigration as a result of the immigration policy. It's utterly bonkers in every respect. Andy in Darlington says, Ian, there's an old saying, you shouldn't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. I love that. The clown pants government is setting the British population on fire to keep immigrants and asylum seekers warm. Then the establishment, bolstered by lefty human rights lawyers, are trying to tell us that it doesn't burn. Keep up the great work. Yeah, it's kind of that, isn't it? It's the more you think of the obscenity of this. One of the reasons why left-wing politics ultimately and fundamentally is flawed, and there are many reasons. I mean, it's just a fact, really. It's kind of an endearing but ultimately stupid system of politics. The reason in this respect is that the moral game will never work. And of course, left-wing thinking exists for a good part on a moral plane. It exists on the basis that we do stuff and it makes us morally better than someone else. I've never understood when they talk about sort of, taxing people more, that the morality, as if taxation is in itself a sort of a moral thing. It might be a necessary thing. I don't know whether you could argue that there's a sort of an ecclesiastical component to it that kind of usurps all other considerations. And the morality element, taking money off people to give to somebody else, it is not a moral maneuver or position. It doesn't work. It really doesn't work. And you can follow that thing through the whole system. Well, we took some money off there. So you're taking money off poor people to give to some other apparently poor and vulnerable people. But the second group were not people who already live here and pay their taxes here. In fact, they're people who've contributed nothing at all. They've come across on a boat. And in all likelihood, a big contingent of that cohort will not even be legit asylum seekers, but we're still giving them the same money. And then when they try to, we try to deport that person, our tax money is paid again, that goes into the legal kitty that will fund legal aid so that lawyers can protect them. I mean, it's laughable. When you say it out loud, it is laughable, man. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 0344 499 1000. So, reference... Oh, you've just got rid of the Hungary detail. Come on, Finn, whack it back up there. Somebody mentioned Hungary banning human rights laws. Apparently, Hungary's parliament passed a series of laws that criminalise any individual or group that offers to help an illegal immigrant claim asylum. So I would imagine that's where the trouble starts, isn't it? Because a lawyer would go, well, I'm not trying to claim asylum for an illegal immigrant, I'm trying to claim asylum for a legal immigrant. So I don't know whether they've fully banned lawyers, but they've certainly cast a big old shadow on that practice. No doubt about that. This one from Nick in Horsham. The amount of energy that these AI GPU centres consume is astronomical. No mention at all by Deepesh on how this is supplied, and the cooling issue is huge too. He did mention about a couple of times, and I've got to be honest, Nick, I thought Deepesh was brilliant, but boy, he kind of lost me halfway through when he started talking about the Singapore system. To be fair, I asked the question, and he answered in very sort of intricate, esoteric, trade economic kind of terminology, and I'm sure you spotted that as well. I was with him in the spirit of the journey. He did say that nuclear energy would be the requirement and will be less dependent on places like Russia for energy, and that's why we need to get that element going for these centres alone. I don't know what the ratio is. A data centre requires this amount of X, Y, Z. I'm really not sure, but nonetheless, that's what he alluded to. I'm sure we'll get more detail on that over the coming weeks, because as many of you have pointed out, including Nick there, you really can't overstate what is required to run one of these things. And when I alluded to it when I was talking to Deepesh, the Mark Zuckerberg story, I can't remember where it is, where he's building a data center that is kind of half the size of a small state. I mean, this is... It's not even like a town, it's like a city of data center. It's just data center, it's massive. And you do think, what, for what? Why do we need that? We've got the internet and stuff, got our social media, hogwash as it might be. Was it in Ohio? I think it might have been. Just beyond anything you can imagine. It's beyond kind of sci-fi stuff. Why? What's the purpose of it? Yeah, you need AI. What is it going to be used and for specifically? We know there's some great applications in the world of medicine, in the world of education, and certain parts of innovation. Yeah, if you can get a computer to go, right, invent the solution to fixing this car, invent the solution to fixing my previously terminal brain injury. I mean, what's not to like? Everybody gets that. Yes, the size of Manhattan, apparently, this thing that Zuckerberg is building. If you've ever been to Manhattan, that'll give you an idea of the kind of stuff that this fella's knocking out. And that's for, should we be scared, I suppose, is the headline. Let's get a word on this. Millions of pensioners face income tax as this, and they haven't had to pay it before, of course, as the state pension nears 12,570. That's the threshold. This is next April, with no plans to raise tax limits or offer exemptions. Campaigners slam this creeping injustice that could pull millions into tax by 2027. Let's speak to Ryan Saby, economics editor at The Sun. I mean, it's the classic old trick, Ryan, isn't it? This is not entirely new. It happens as we go through the tax thresholds that people find themselves in the next tax threshold when, that shouldn't really have been the case. But this is, I suppose, different because it's going to, for the first time, I understand, hoover up people like pensioners who've never had to pay it before.
Yeah, that's right. You could see a situation where pensioners are filling out self-assessment forms to make sure that their tax affairs are actually in order. Now, I think the one thing, the saving grace for many pensioners who may be worried about this, let's take us back to last July, actually, when the government decided to get rid of the universal winter fuel payment for pensioners. If they go for the pensioners again, they'll be hell to pay for. It was bad enough the first time, and I just can't see this actually happening. I think what the Chancellor will probably do is just raise that threshold so it's slightly above that limit for where pensioners get their state pension. So it's like a very, very brave Chancellor to actually tax pensioners for the first time. I just can't see it happening. But pensioners do have to be on their toes and realise that this actually it could happen. It's sort of something that theoretically could happen, but when push comes to shove, I can't see it.
I mean, can you imagine, Ryan, the horror of, after that whole winter fuel debacle, having to stand there and announce, without saying it out loud, but implicit within your details of your fiscal plans, that you're going to, for the first time, this government will start taxing pensioners. I mean, goodness me. I mean, that would be... it'd be the end of this government, wouldn't it? I can't imagine it could, So I think you're probably right. They're going to find a workaround on this, surely.
Yeah, they definitely will. And I think this comes down to basic politics, where before the last election, Rishi Sunak, he made a steadfast promise that threshold would always remain above that state pension amount. Rachel Reeves didn't commit to that, and even yesterday when I was speaking to people at the Treasury, there was no firm commitment that was going to happen. Now, I guess it takes quite a bit of working out to do. How do you actually do this? You may have to team up with HMRC and come up with a mechanism of how this happens. But I think the one thing that is also quite telling, it'll be those people who are not only on the state pension, but may well get a small private pension, whether that be a few £1,000s every year. They will be the ones who will be caught up in this, and they will be the ones who, just by the amounts going up each year of those thresholds, they will be actually having to pay, or maybe a small amount of income tax every single year. So they're the ones who are actually going to have to watch out for this, and the support will have to come in from the government to actually help them out. Because, Ian, I'm not sure if you've filled out, a tax return. I've done it. And it is complicated, and there are bits on that form that you have to look up and trying to get to the bottom of it. Maybe speak to an accountant to actually get some advice on it. So it's a daunting prospect, and that's why I think it's just such a sort of a monumental cultural sort of societal sort of shift to actually get a cohort who've never actually had to do this to actually sign up.
100%. And of course, the budget's a couple of months away, November 26th. Almost the end of the year. By the time she gives this speech, Christmas trees will be up all around the country. There's going to be very little tinsel to lob onto those trees, I would imagine. Ryan, we know it's going to be a bit of a stinker, and I don't think even the government are denying that now.
Yeah, no, it looks like that the amount of money that she'll have to find just to effectively stand still will be about £30 billion. And sort of the bad bit of news that the Chancellor has received in the last sort of 24, 48 hours is the fact that the independent watchdog who sort of mark the homework of the government when it comes to growth and how the economy is doing, they've actually downgraded, they will downgrade our productivity levels. And the way that they've done that and the amount that they've done that means that Chancellor will have to find around another £9 billion. So every which way this Chancellor seems to be turning, it seems to be a really, really sort of very difficult moment and difficult decisions that she's going to have to make. So she's going to have to decide where she finds those taxes. Is it, a wealth tax? Now that seems to have been ruled out, but will it be several sort of wealth taxes, or will it be sort of spread across, capital gains tax, inheritance tax? Will there be something on a mansion tax, stamp duty? All these things will have to come in because she tried to sort of make amends and actually try and save some money back in July when it came to the welfare changes, and she struggled with that because her party just wouldn't buy into it. So every which way she turns, it's been tough for her. So there's some big decisions to be made. It seems like income tax thresholds may be extended, so that will may raise about £10 billion, but it's going to be very, very difficult to make it up to that 30 billion. just to stand still, and that's her sort of financial cushion that she's got.
Indeed. Well, it's not going to be dull. It'll be certainly interesting. We'll speak many times, I'm sure, before now and then, Ryan. Thank you for that today. They can't cop the pensioners, can they? Not again. Ryan Saby, economics editor at The Sun. Thank you to him. More from you and lots of comment. We're talking Keir Starmer. I think it's reasonable to ask the question, should they just ditch any pretense that they can solve the immigration crisis? It is a crisis. It's massive. It has more tentacles of problems than almost any other area of our current daily lives. And, you know, if you don't want to take notice of people standing outside hotels perturbed by who might be inside them, then just look at the economics. The economics tell the biggest story, I think, on this. Let's get a word from Scott in Essex. How you doing, Scott?
Hello, all doing well. Just lots and lots going on.
Yeah.
And we're still on the same subject 6 months down the line.
We are.
With human rights, immigration and the votes.
Yep.
When can we turn the page and get some new topics to discuss?
Be quite nice, wouldn't it? Be really quite nice.
One of the things that's come up in a discussion is one of the best things we can do is implement a procedure with our legal and judiciary system.
Yep.
All acts must be done in the benefit and not detriment of the British country, the British people, and the British identity. Therefore, any legal activity that is done cannot place Britain in jeopardy, which would actually kibosh a lot of this human rights nonsense with criminals demanding they have human rights and they couldn't care less about their victims. But we also need to do something about the lawyers, which are these ambulance chasers, which are constantly parading their idiocy and political narrative and demanding that if anyone doesn't agree, they're obviously a very nasty person and they've got a long list of names they can call us.
Yeah, you are absolutely bang on. Thank you, Scott, for that. And that's what it comes back to ultimately, isn't it? It is that this should never be a left-right issue. And to quite a degree it isn't, which is the whole reason why, if you consider, I have to bring Boris Johnson's name back into this because, you know, one of the reasons why he hoovered up the red wall seats was because he was speaking the language of ordinary people who historically had not been Tory voters. They were Labour voters. But if you went around those proud Labour working men's clubs, just as an obvious cliched example, and asked people about channel migration and the like, you wouldn't find the kind of human rights lawyer response. You'd find the same response that you'd get from Nigel Farage. And these are proud working class Labour voters. And that's the bit this government has missed, but it's not in their DNA because they exist in a kind of metropolitan North London bubble. They sit around their dinner tables in Islington and Hampstead, quaffing expensive wine, discussing the good and the great and who they've rubbed shoulders with and what they need to do and how they are so beautifully benevolent and charitable because they help people. And if you don't agree with their policy on something like immigration, then you're not just, and he hit the nail on the head there, Scott in Essex, you're not just wrong, but you are, here's the word again, morally wrong. You're not a nice person. I'm a nice person. I want to help people. It's not a question of helping people. It's a case of what is doable, what is practical, what is reasonable, and what is fair. And this ain't fair on anyone. 0344 499 1000.
He tells me that Number 10 have been trying to keep quite a tight lid on the number of questions that will be asked.
Funny that.
Donald Trump, he's a pretty freewheeling guy, but he is also the guest here. Normally, when he hosts these sort of press conferences on his home turf in the Oval Office or in the East Wing of the White House, he takes a lot of questions, and he doesn't have a sort of pre-selected lists like Starmer likes to have of, he knows what's coming, and he's much more of a free-for-all.
Yeah.
I suspect they're going to meet somewhere in the middle there.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is 10 to 3. Just before we go back to the course, we've got the voice of doom. It is day 4, I think. Day 4. Remember, this is a mystery voice, but it's a politician you're looking for. They could be past or present. They could be, when I say past, they could be from the last 10 years. They could be dead. They could be from still well alive, but from the 60s, maybe even the 1860s. The idea, of course, is just to come up with whose voice it is. Have a listen.
Got off to a pretty messy start.
Who's that? Here it is again.
Got off to a pretty messy start.
You can message, don't call, but message 87222 if you want to have a crack at that. 87222. If we get a right answer, we reveal all after the news. If we don't, it rolls over. Here it is again.
Got off to a pretty messy start.
Who's that then? 87222. More comment from you. Karen in Fife says, afternoon, Ian. When our government's own defence around the closure of the Bell Hotel was the human rights of the hotel's occupants outweighed the local community. That should have been the alert that we're all up the creek without a paddle. I think Karen put that politely at the end as well. That was the moment, really, wasn't it? Yeah. I mean, look, they said, well, there's not an equivalence between the rights of the locals and the right to the... Yeah, kind of is. Communities are, we're told communities are focal points. They're central. There's good, kind of intelligent social reasons why we... should harvest and take care and nurture the essence of a community. But then when you ask the community, their voice counts for absolutely jack shizzle, apparently. Charlie in East Sussex, what do you got, Charlie? Afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Do you know what? You can't write half of this, can you?
Nope.
As I told you, researcher, number one, love the programme as usual. Henry Bolton, a lot of time for that guy. The problem that we have is in negotiation, and I think it's been talked about, when you're in a sales situation, you have two parties, and the deal has to be mutually beneficial for both parties.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're the party on the back foot. We want something. And the French are not going to give it to us easily. And in fact, the French really haven't given us anything at all.
No.
So what have we got? 1 in, 1 out, plus the family of the one that's coming in. So in terms of negotiation, we were always on the back foot. So in my mind, there's no way we should be entering this kind of deal without a benefit. It only benefits one party, and that's the French. Yeah. So they can veto anything that we want to do. They can veto anybody that we want to send, but we don't have that same mechanism.
And that's the crazy thing. And bearing in mind what's happened in the last couple of days, Charlie, the people that have been selected to be sent back to France would be the ones that the government or the border force considered to be the most likely acceptable to the French.
Ian, I mean, you had that. I can't remember his name now.
Joseph.
But, that lawyer on earlier. Oh my giddy aunt. These are the kind of people that we're dealing with. They're looking, and I don't doubt he's a nice chap and he's a very, very clever and astute guy.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the law, they're looking for ways to circumvent what the actual government does. And I'm not talking about him personally, I'm talking about these human rights lawyers. So when you've got someone that's paid to come over, his mum's paid £1,000 to bring him over from Eritrea, okay, there might be a bit of hardship coming over, but the whole goal is to get here. Once he's here, he can then bring A, B, C, D, E, F, G family members over with him. So it's actually, when you're looking at it, it's really an investment for his family, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's
indeed.
The way I see it. It's an I've invested £1,000, but look what I'm going to get for that £1,000. And I'm sorry, Ian, and we are going to get more. We're going to have to get more draconian about what we do. Otherwise, there's no point.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Well, we had this message, by the way, Charlie, from Tony. Says the government said it's a pilot scheme, which is true. 2 pilots have flown to France. Far. Well, there you go. That's as good as it's got. Listen, Charlie, thank you very much indeed. Let's get some voice notes on all of this issue from a variety of your callers, Alison, Joe and Pete. Let's have a listen to what they've got to say on the current policy of Keir Starmer's government on immigration.
Hello, Ian. I was just thinking, I wonder if one of the reasons that a human rights lawyer is given to the court with regards to a migrant not going back is because they're not going back on a green form of transport, because this government is so wound up about getting everything green that actually going back on an aeroplane is the wrong thing to be doing. I wonder if that's been used as an argument.
Hi, Ian. In regards to trying to deport people, I think the biggest issue we face is legal aid here, because if they didn't have legal aid, they wouldn't be able to employ these lawyers to actually get the judges to make crazy decisions. I do wonder, if we started sending people back and just ignored the judges' decisions, would they still be able to claim legal aid from another country? Could that just be the way we need to go forward with this?
Ian, we have to come to the conclusion now that this government is against our own British people. They care nothing but for us. All they care about is these illegal immigrants and people outside the UK. Now, really, right, they're supposed to work for us. Isn't that treasonous, right? They need to be removed, really. They need to be sacked, removed from Parliament and a new government installed. Election, please. We need an election now. Yeah.
Pete, thank you very much indeed. And Joe before that, and also Alison in South Wales. Some great points there. It's interesting about, when I said at the beginning, it was the only question I thought was really pertinent to this. Should Labour now just give up on having an immigration policy? And it would actually be in their favour, I think, because we know it's not in their heart. They don't really believe any of this stuff. They're stupid to try and chase a kind of reform policy, which is just a tad more robust than what Labour are proposing. And it would please their own kind of left-wing supporters. And that's probably, if I was advising Keir Starmer, I'd say, go left, mate. Go to where your natural home is. Stop pretending you're something else. Just appeal to your own gallery, because you might even be able to hoover up some of those potential Corbyn voters as well. Because you're not going to try, there's no Tory or Reform voter that's going to suddenly go, oh, Keir, yeah, you've really nailed it with your one in, one out thing, mate, haven't you? One comes in from Fern in Glasgow, who says, if we can't prove the guy from Iran has converted to Christianity, this is referenced my conversation with the lawyer, how can the Iranian government know if he has? Whatever his religious beliefs, it's the Iranian guy in the Iranian guy's head, and nobody can see it except for him. It's a very good point. Our lawyer said, well, even the fact that he's left Iran is enough for him to get a torrid time when he goes back, so you can't send him back. Well, you can't organise an immigration policy on that basis. I mean, that's not fair. That's not reasonable. I don't want to live in Iran because I think it's a bit rubbish, probably true. But we're not at war with Iran, by the way, and there are plenty of proud Iranians, I'm sure. Nonetheless, that's not an excuse to claim asylum. You can't go round the world and go, I think I'll go and live in, I don't know, we'll try the UK this week, shall we? Last week we thought it was going to be New Zealand, but a bit far away. So No, it can't work like that. It's got to be a civilised, progressive policy that works and is fair for individuals and for the host country. On a different note, here's the voice of doom.
Got off to a pretty messy start.
If you think you know who that is, 87222. Let's get the news headlines at 3 now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You better believe it. Welcome back. It is the home of common sense. We are rammed at this end. So much to get through. Keir Starmer's deal with France has fallen through the flipping floor. This is the deportation plan. Utter disarray, legal challenges, protests continuing to block those flights. No one has taken off. 5,000 migrants crossed the Channel just last month alone. And the flagship policy is clearly dead in the water before it's even started. Should Labour just give up on immigration? They can't do it. They can't make it work. And, you know, fundamentally and most profoundly, they don't really believe it anyway, right? More comments from you on that. 0344 499 1000. Also this afternoon, as you've been seeing and watching and listening, the King and Queen have welcomed Donald and Melania Trump to Windsor Castle. For the second, I think it's the first time this has ever happened, the second UK state visit, arriving by Marine One. They were greeted by the Prince and Princess of Wales before a grand carriage procession through the Windsor estate. It was genuinely jaw-dropping. The pomp, the ceremony, everything about it was pitch perfect. I think the President and his wife would have been more than delighted about how this part of their visit has gone. The banquet tonight and a bit of a powwow with Keir Starmer tomorrow. And millions of pensioners face income tax as state pension rises near to the £12,570 threshold. With no plans to raise tax limits, campaigners slam this creeping injustice, which could hit many by 2027. We'll have more on that as well. 0344 499 1000. We'll do the Voice of Doom in a few moments' time. We'll give you, hopefully we can tell you the right answer. Hopefully somebody's got it correct. We'll wait and see. In the meantime, I think it's appropriate we take a moment to look at Donald Trump arriving for that big state visit, calling King Charles a long-term friend, the Windsor procession, the Red Arrow flypast, the state banquet. Trump aims to refine UK-US trade deals, including the billion-pound tech prosperity deal. And of course, security, as you would imagine, is about as tight as it could possibly get. If you put the King and Donald Trump in one place, believe me, the boys and girls who keep an eye on these people are out in force. Let's firstly speak with Joseph Sternberg, Wall Street Journal editorial board. Good afternoon, Joseph.
Hi, Ian.
Nice to see you again. Look, I mean, this is obviously an important visit. He is not just any old head of state. Our huge allegiance that we have with the United States, our kind of biggest ally for many, many years. And it looks as if a fairly lucrative deal has come with him on that big old plane and helicopter.
Yes, and I think that that's a really important point to keep in mind about all of this, because, look, I get it. Donald Trump is controversial. He is controversial here in the UK. He is controversial back in the US, everywhere he goes. But I think that the important point is that he also, for better or worse, represents the US at the moment. And this is a crucial relationship for the UK to nurture, I think, both in terms of security and the political relationship and also the economic relationship. And so I think that, to the extent that there is a discussion about trade issues on the state visit or, potential investment opportunities, and especially the potential for US investment into the UK, which the British economy really pretty desperately needs at the moment, take the win.
What does this mean for Donald Trump? Look, Mr. Trump, quite understandably, is not going to do anything that's not in his own interest. I mean, the visuals, the optics of this play very well. I took, as you do in this job, a look around all the obvious American news sites, whether that was print or whether it was online. This is the headline at the moment everywhere. It just looks great, doesn't it? Donald Trump in a carriage being taken around Windsor Castle. Best photo opportunity on the planet.
Yeah, I think one of Donald Trump's flaws as a leader, and it's a serious one, is that he is, prone to or susceptible to flattery. But, in this case, that works to Britain's advantage, because there is an opportunity for Britain to offer him the a chance to do a state visit like this and meet with the royal family and allow the king to be a good representative of the country on the world stage, and that ends up working out to both countries' benefits in this instance, because it is such an important relationship.
Indeed. It's kind of soon over, of course, and now all the optics of the pageantry and everything we've seen, once that side of it is done, I suppose, the meeting with Keir Starmer, you know how these things work, all of the, they're not going to sit there ironing out the detail. All of that stuff is done by those around them way beforehand. Is there likely, Joseph, do you think, to be any sort of big announcement? I don't know, steel tariffs or something like that? Is there going to be something that comes out of this where we go, wow, we didn't expect that?
I'm not sure I'm hugely optimistic about that. The real problem with the steel tariffs in particular is going to be that so much of the rest of President Trump's tariff agenda is under legal threat in the U.S. because there's a good argument that the courts are crediting that he exceeded his authority with all of those Liberation Day tariffs. And so steel is going to be the one thing that he can tariff, which presidents have done before. So don't be optimistic about that, but do hope for some progress on tech investment issues, and I think that there is room for both sides to reach agreements on that.
We will see. Joseph, great to see you again. Thank you, sir. Joseph Sternberg, Wall Street Journal editorial board. Thank you to him. Rick Gates also with us, Trump's former campaign chairman. Rick, afternoon to you, sir.
Great to see you, Ian. How are you?
Very good. Listen, just at the same point that I made to Joseph there, I mean, the optics of this are fabulous. It looks great. The UK, really know how to put on a bit of pageantry, especially for a moment like this. And I would imagine Mr. Trump loved every moment of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So far, it's been fantastic to watch. I can sense that the president is just watching his body language, the interaction, absolutely ecstatic at the visit. And look, there is nobody that has so much tradition and the pageantry that the Brits can pull off. And just the historic nature of it being kind of the second trip for a single U.S. president, obviously that in itself making history is going to be very important to President Trump.
Yeah, I was watching it all yesterday unfold, and I just thought about, you often think about the people behind the scenes, and you know a little bit about what this looks like, Rick. I mean, you know, an aeroplane lands, you know, two people get out of it, they walk across the tarmac, they meet the foreign secretary, they jump into a chopper, off they go to another place. It's all rather splendid, it's all seamless, the choreography amazing. Again today, the helicopter arrives in Wimbledon. Behind the scenes, there are hundreds of people at every level going, oh, thank goodness for that. It's worked.
Months of labor, lots of late night calls. Yeah, I don't think anybody understands how much time it takes into preparing for a visit like this. And then you can always plan for what you think you know, but it's always the unknowns that pop out, you know, during the visit that nobody's expected, nobody planned for. As an example, in this visit, I thought the incredibly gracious gesture by King Charles to allow President Trump to lead the inspection of the guard. I mean, obviously that was not choreographed, that was not planned. That is something that the king did. Maybe he told a couple of his aides, but those are the things that you look at, and that's what I think the media will focus on in terms of the success of this state visit.
And it's interesting, I know they are within the confines of Windsor Castle, but the security of this you can't really overstate. These are, you know, two of the most protected families, if you like, on the planet. That's a massive consideration on something like this.
Well, it's incredible to look at, you know, when you see normally there are dozens of Secret Service agents around the president. And when you watched the carriage ride, other aspects, when he was greeting the king and queen and Prince William and Princess Kate, you don't see them in the background. And that is an important, I think, note to make in terms of the belief of the president's team and how secure and safe they feel, particularly in an environment right now where obviously the president with his assassination attempt and then recently Charlie Kirk's assassination. It's very intimidating times with that regard, but watching this unfold has been fantastic to see that these two countries can go beyond that type of political violence.
Yeah, indeed. Tomorrow, of course, it gets a little more political because Starmer and the president meet. There's going to be the usual Q&A from the press. Look, we could sit here today, Rick, and we could write it for them. We know the questions that are going to come up, and certainly, you know, they've both had a bit of a turbulent couple of weeks as leaders. And interestingly, in a kind of move you couldn't make up, from one side of the Atlantic to the other, a lot of that turbulence is over one man called Jeffrey Epstein. There's going to be a journalist that's going to raise this tomorrow, right?
Oh, no question. They'll try to dig into it a little bit. I mean, it was interesting earlier, you know, a lot of the focus on Epstein has shifted over to your side of the pond, primarily because of Prince Andrew and then now Lord Mendelsohn and his sacking very recently. That's kind of focused the spotlight on you. It's still an issue here in the U.S. I think it will be an issue. But at the end of the day, I give the Brits a lot of credit. They've learned a lot about President Trump and the way he operates by putting on all this pageantry and tradition today and then going into those difficult subjects tomorrow of not just, you know, trade and tariff negotiations, but also Gaza, Ukraine, and some of the other issues that they will be talking about. That's certainly going to be a test for your prime minister and what he's able to achieve, and noting his decreasing and declining popularity right now from a whole variety of issues. It'll be interesting to see what he can cobble away as a win.
Yeah, I was about, you know, our prime minister is about as popular as measles right now, and you know, it's kind of one of those strange situations. Mr. Trump is always very polite to Keir Starmer. You know, he talks about, he concedes, look, the guy's a bit more of a liberal than me. However, I like him. Do you think when the cameras switch off, Trump is quite so flattering?
Absolutely. What you see is what you get with Donald Trump. He doesn't say one thing and then do another behind the scenes. He genuinely likes to be in that environment where he can get to know you. That's how he sizes people up. It's not through a lot of briefing notes that aides prepare, anything of that. It is one-on-one that Donald Trump connects with you. He understands you as a person and will determine, you know, in his judgment, whether or not you're somebody that he can work with or not. And so I think given the track record of your prime minister, and certainly during our election in 2024, and taking some, I think, egregious steps that a world leader wouldn't take in terms to offending another potential president, in this case when Donald Trump was elected, yeah, there was some damage control to do on, you know, Keir Starmer's side to repair that relationship. I think this will obviously be a good notch in that cap to continue that relationship building.
Yeah, just looking at some of those images, by the way, just a final point, Rick, and you know, I kind of know the answer, but it's worth asking. When you look at all the various people around Windsor Castle dressed in the various uniforms, I hope the average American doesn't think that we all dress like that every day.
They certainly don't, but we certainly like to see it because it's not anything that we have in our country, and it's those traditions and celebrations that you're able to pull off in England that make it just so stunning to watch. And I'll be curious to see how many Americans watched it this morning, but I can tell you a great deal did. If nothing else, it takes a lot of the focus off of our politics here and puts it back on you, but it is certainly stunning to watch.
That's great. Rick, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate that. Rick Gates, Trump's former campaign chairman. Some of the kind of, the word isn't costumes, is it? There's obviously official military uniforms, and then there's others like the footmen, the kind of stuff the footmen wear. It's never lost on me whenever I see those, you know, they're getting beamed around the world, that imagery, as to how many people wonder if the average Brit dresses like that. I mean, I'd give it a go for a little while. I mean, you wouldn't want to, if you forgot them, oh my God, it's Beefeater Tuesday, I forgot, got my jeans on. What was I thinking? It's Footman Friday. No, the garters. I left them by the bed. They were. I think Finn, our producer, would rock some of that stuff. Frankly, I think he'd do well at that. Liveries. Is that what they're called? Liveries. Or so. Well, they've got different roles, haven't they? There's different. There's the footman. There's the, you know, the various people. The equerries. Equerry. There's all of those people. There's lots of different titles going on around there. I tell you what, I bet there's a heck of a pecking order behind the scenes in that world. Let's just, before we talk to Matt, let's talk about the voice of doom. The voice of doom. Here's the voice we were asking you to guess.
Got off to a pretty messy start.
This is day 4 of that voice. These are some of the guesses. Robert Jenrick, Chris Hume, Keir Starmer, Francis Maud, no. Monica Lewinsky, no. Robert Sheldon, no. Larry Grayson, it is not. Jeffrey Archer, John Redwood, no. It's none of those. We haven't got a right answer. It rolls over to tomorrow. Back to your calls. Matt's in Cheshire. Matt, what have you got for us? Afternoon to you. On that state visit, what are you thinking?
Firstly, do you know Bill Mayer? He met Trump and he'd scolded him for years, called him names, called him everything under the sun.
Yes.
And he said he was absolutely great. He said he was really, really the total opposite of everything he expected. And that just goes to show how far cable media in America's portrayal of Trump is more about their derangement than Trump's personality.
True. I mean, he's a flawed character, but, you know, there's a bit of, not a bit of me, quite a big chunk of me, Matt, that I don't think you'd want a leader unless they had some of those kind of idiosyncrasies and quirks to them. Isn't that what makes... I'm not suggesting Trump is brilliant. I'm not the greatest fan of Trump, but I understand what he's doing and I can see the positives in what he's doing. I think anyone can see that. But you need somebody who has multi-layers to them, right? I mean, you don't want someone... We've got Keir Starmer. There's no layers to Keir Starmer.
Yeah, we've got like a personality vacuum as a prime minister. Trump is... He drops whoppers about and embellishes things, but he's not a liar. And he speaks his mind and says exactly what he thinks, and that in itself is a quality. I mainly I was watching about 15, 20 minutes of it earlier, and I kept clicking over to CNN, and they didn't televise it at all. And I thought, a week after Charlie Kirk's murder, when everybody's going on about dialing down the rhetoric and dialing down and sort of being more amicable,
they are so spiteful and totally, again, deranged.
That's bizarre. It is. I mean, it is front page of their website, and I don't know how that translates with their broadcast element, but that's interesting that they wouldn't have televised their own president turning up for a royal state visit. That's extraordinary. I'd fire the editor or the journalist that decided to not show it.
I think they may have had it on a feed or something online. They do have a feed, I think, CNN. But yeah. I kept turning over. I kept seeing Democrat politicians being interviewed. I treble checked just to see I wasn't sort of wrong. And then I just thought, no, they've already fired all the people that were giving him stick before Kamala Harris was obliterated. Yep. And apparently turned over a new leaf, and now they're back to being spiteful again. So weird, they just can't stop themselves, Ian. It's that. It is.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's spot on. But maybe free speech. Where do we place that in these kind of stories? I'm always a bit perturbed when Trump is, suing journalists or broadcasters, and another one was announced yesterday, or banning them from press conferences because they don't. He doesn't like the way they report or believes them to be biased or fake or something. Where does that sit within his big shtick about free speech?
Yeah,
you mentioned Charlie Kirk as well.
It is hypocritical, obviously, but if you took into account the amount of attacks he's had from the media, from Biden, from the judiciary, I mean, we think in Britain we've been attacked as a unit. Yeah. Sort of the people are being attacked. He was attacked personally more than all of us put together. So you can understand he's going to have some beef to a degree. Yeah. Well, he should have some, maybe understanding with Starmer in that respect, because we don't stop slaughtering him, do we? I hope to God, I don't know if you remember, he gave Theresa May a few jibes about the NHS on stage in front of the media. Yeah. And I've been praying for months that he makes some derogatory comment. He's been being nice to him all this time, and he's been saving it up for when he's right in front of him, in front of the press. Well, it's funny. Yeah, I remember that. Somebody asked, wouldn't that be hilarious? Somebody asked, didn't they, when Theresa May was there, about whether the NHS is for sale, and he said, he said everything's for sale, didn't he? And of course, it caused a bit of a stir. I think what he was talking about was healthcare rather than specifically the NHS, but it certainly threw a firework up the trouser leg of half the civil service. There's no doubt about that. Matt, great call as ever. Thank you for that. And Anne in Archway reference the big AI super warehouses, these huge bases that will house essentially nothing more than machinery that will power AI. I mean, it is beyond a sci-fi movie, this stuff. Anne says it's all digital ID, money, phones, and only work while there's power to run them. I will not comply, and know many who think the same. What happened to choice? Yeah, that's the bit. I mean, these data centres, they don't need them to run. I mean, the digital ID stuff, and they can do without the AI. You don't need the AI stuff. And there is a reasonable argument. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to go, what the hell are they going to be building? They need all of this. If it needs that much, don't invent it. 0344 499 1000.
I think more than one person has now suggested he cannot survive until the next election as Prime Minister. However, he's already exceeded my predictions, which was even before the election, that he wouldn't last beyond this year's spring local elections. He survived that long, and he probably will survive, actually, until next year's disastrous repeat of those elections, simply because of the structure of the Labour Party and its absence of any real method of getting rid of a serving leader.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Stephen Stoke referenced The Voice of Doom, where we did not get a winner. We did not get a winner. It's going to roll over to tomorrow. Somebody always mentions Monica Lewinsky. Stephen Stoke says, you missed a trick here. When somebody guesses Monica Lewinsky in a competition and it's the wrong answer, you're supposed to say close but no cigar. It's what's expected. Finn, our producer, had to Google that reference. Thank you for that, Steve. Love it. Andrew's in Hertfordshire. Andrew, what's going on? Afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. I think you'll find that Starmer prostrating himself at the feet of Trump is about to backfire dramatically.
Do you think so? In what respect?
Well, Trump has got what he wants now. He's got the royal trip. It's the second one. No one's done it. He's had the glamour. So now he can sit back and objectively go after Starmer in some very interesting ways. Take Israel.
Yeah.
Take migration.
Mm-hmm.
Take energy costs.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got the Mandelson scenario. Sure. And the thing about Mandelson is if Starmer is to follow it through, he should throw him out the Labour Party, because what he says in one of those mails is that this is not even an offence in our country. Child abuse is an offence wherever you are in the world. That was child abuse.
Does he say that? This is not even an offence in our country?
Yes. Because the play that he's making there is relative to the ages, but child abuse is child abuse.
Of course, yes, he's on about the age of legal consent, isn't he? 18 rather than 16 and that kind of stuff. But that doesn't get you out of jail on that one. That's horrendous.
It is, and why he's in the Labour Party. And then you look deeper into the scenario of the gentleman thrown out for the slurs against Diane Abbott. Who did he send to it in the Labour Party? Why are they still in the Labour Party? Starmer is clueless.
The people, you mean the people he sent it to, that were on?
They're in the Labour Party as well.
Can you be guilty if somebody sends you something?
Yeah. Yes. Well, that poor police officer in London, the lady, she was sent something by a friend, and she lost her job over it.
She was a police officer as well, wasn't she? I think.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, and a high-ranking one. And Mandelson went on to be the head of the NSPCC. Think of that. The National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children is friends of a child abuser. So if you look at Prince Andrew and everything he's lost, why is Mandelson still in all those organisations?
I mean, Mandelson, the more you talk about it, and it's brilliant that you've kind of mentioned it with such clarity, Andrew, because the more you think about it, the more unbelievable it is as to what's happened. All right, you're allowed to know someone before we knew they were a wrong 'un, right? We all agree on that, okay? You can't malign someone because they hung around with somebody before we knew they'd done bad things. But of course, this story is specifically about someone who hung around with somebody even once they knew they did those bad things, and in this case it's not a bit of gentle shoplifting out of Walmart, it is child abuse. And he not only stood by him, he wrote letters to him to articulate how much he stood by him and how much he loved him.
Yeah, and this is where Starmer doesn't do people. Last night, a man who is innocent until proved guilty Partey came on to play against Spurs, and the crowd were all against him. If you saw that outpour of public contempt for an individual, that's what Starmer doesn't get. This is serious. He is beatifying, he is championing a man who accepted a child abuser as a friend and keeping him in the Labour Party.
Yeah. It's messed up, Andrew. We can all agree on that. Great call as ever. Thank you, Andrew in Hertfordshire. Rob says the irony, everyone in the UK screaming for Mandelson to resign last week because of his connections to Epstein. This week, it's full royal state visit with all the pageantry costing millions for someone with huge connections to Epstein. No wonder the people of the UK are angry. Of course, the defence of Trump is that when he realised he was a wrong un, Trump had nothing to do with him, cut his connections with him years ago. That's the defence. Now, I can't corroborate that, but I know that that's the one that keeps coming up. He was mates with him. Lots of people were mates. In fact, anyone that was worth a few quid or mixed in Manhattan society and beyond was mates at some level. We always say friends. These people are never really friends. They're usually just a sort of a bit deeper than acquaintances. They all know each other. They all know that, you know, they're trying to gain one thing from the other, and, you know, it'll be in their own interest to know each other. It's a kind of weird sort of cat and mouse thing. Then they hate each other for a bit, and then they like each other again. Then they don't invite them to the next big society party. Then they do. Blur. Trump's defence is, yeah, he knew him back then, like everybody else knew him, and he went to the parties, and he had fun with him, and blur, but didn't know him, or didn't hang around with him after it became apparent he was a wrong un. I honestly cannot tell you what the chronology is on that one. 0344 499 1000. More calls from you on the way. Just gone 3:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
For Jeremy Kyle here, of course, at 4 on Drive. David in Cheshire says, every human right lefty lawyer should, if he believes his ideals and motives, give his services for free and sponsor every illegal immigrant he represents with a bond. And if he has room, shelter the immigrant in his own home. There was a time when the image of a human rights lawyer was kind of the opposite. You know, people who almost did, and probably did work for free, by the way, who rescued huge swathes of people from places, often with a lawyer background. And they did this because, you know, there was tyranny in the air. It was all over the place. Fascism, whether it was coming out of Italy or, of course, Nazis in Germany, wherever. Human rights lawyers at the time that were there to help people with genuine, I mean, the most pressing and horrendous cases, they were admired. That was the point. Society admired them, thought these guys are great. It's amazing what they're doing. They're doing the work that loads of other lawyers won't touch because there's no bunts in it. You can't make a living out of this stuff. So they're not like the criminal lawyers. Not like that. They're not like the property lawyers and contract lawyers who make six-figure salaries. So they had a big respect, and then that image over the years has sort of quietly and now not so quietly changed due to everything that we discussed here this afternoon on the programme. 0344 499 1000. Now, too many young people are getting out of the habit of, guess what? Going to work. Yes, this is Gen Zers spending 25% less time in nature than Gen Z because of bad weather. In nature? What does that even mean? Does that mean outside, Finn? I don't know. Is that what it's meant to mean? Right, I've never heard anyone describe that as in nature. Have you, Amy? I'm going to spend some time in nature. Than Gen Z is because of bad weather and loneliness. Let's speak to writer-commentator Charlie Bentley-Astor, who I think, Charlie, I'm right in saying you are a Gen Zer, so, you know, you would know.
Just by 1 year. I definitely feel more akin to the generation before me, but officially I'm a Gen Z.
What is going... I mean, there's a big temptation to simply say that when it comes to the going out element of this story, it's just about the sort of change of life, isn't it? You know, you don't need to leave the house to order food. You don't need to leave the house to go to the cinema. We've got TVs that resemble a small cinema screen. We've got everything we need. All of our entertainment, all of our needs are catered for in the house. Why do you need to go outside?
Well, you've nailed it. Our lifestyle has changed dramatically, particularly since COVID, which forced everyone to learn how to do more outdoorsy things inside. Social media is a massive factor. Both parents and young people cite screen time as the #1 reason they're not going outside. And we've all been there. We easily get lost. You know, we pick up, we think, oh, we're just going to text someone, we're just going to check the weather or something, and we end up scrolling for half an hour, 45 minutes. The real world kind of ceases to exist whilst we're online, and it does then prevent you from going outside, because once you surface, you then go, oh, I've got to go and do this, that and the other now.
I mean, I can understand if there's, you know, if somebody does, you know, crunches the numbers and says, oh, look, you know, 10 years ago, people of this age group went out more than people of the age group today. But it's whether, I suppose, there's other more disturbing reasons behind it. You know, are people genuinely becoming more introverted? Is it loneliness? Is it just the idea that solitude is a preferable disposition than going to the pub and mixing with a whole bunch of people?
I mean, I'm afraid I'm one of the Gen Zers who can say that 67% of Gen Z don't go outside for several days. And I sort of have to make a conscious effort, even just to sort of drink my tea on the doorstep. And I instantly feel sort of a relief from the inside oppressive-ness of being inside. But I don't... certainly that instinct to sort of go out and socialise that I might have felt more at university, I don't feel anymore, partly because all my friends are employed or living elsewhere now. So like my social group is more internet based now. I might, you know, go up to London and see them, but we've all been pulled different ways. I think actually this is common for lots of adults. Unless you've got a partner or children, that you make a concerted effort to go out on the weekend or something. The only time you go outside is to commute. The amount of people going down the pub and socialising is not many, because the pubs are closing. They can't afford to stay open. They've not got the trade anymore.
I think it's also, you know, it depends on your, I suppose, outlook in terms of, I don't know whether it's about mixing with people or just the faff sometimes. You know, if I have to go to Tesco, I have to get in the car and drive down the road. I could walk it, but it's a, you know, 25-minute walk. And if it's pouring hard, that's another 25 minutes back, and with like loads of bags of shopping. So you drive it, and that can be annoying because there's a couple of major roads I encounter, and then I have to get into Tesco car park, and, you know, there's always people who park funny, you know, the parking weirdos. And then, of course, I have to get through the crowds of people and queue up. So practically, I can sense why it's just faff-based rather than me or anyone else. Obviously, I'm a different age group, but becoming sort of almost kind of claustrophobic or agoraphobic in this case. It's not a disease as such, a mental position. It's just that we are maybe a bit more discerning about where we want to spend our lives. Years ago, people would have gone, I've got to go to the shops, I go to the shops. Now we think about stuff and analyse it and look at our rights.
Well, yeah, and I think you're right. And human beings are programmed to take the path of least resistance. And so if the path of least resistance is to get out your phone, go onto an app, order your shopping and get it delivered to you, you're going to do that. Now, even though I'm a young person, I'm a bit of a technophobe, so I will just go to the shop. But I've definitely noticed when I was at university, I couldn't drive, and my nearest sort of large Tesco's was about 25-minute walk away. And I had to get a week shop and carry it back to my dorm. It was, a week shop, very heavy with rucksack and 2 bags. Yeah. And it was such a slog. But I remember the sort of sense of purpose that it gave me, and aliveness that I had to trudge through the winter rain, and I'd get back and absolutely drop everything on the floor, flop on my bed and sort of just chill out for 5 minutes, get my breath back. But I'd say that I was happier then than I am now, being able to jump in my car, pop down the shop, come back, no human interaction. It made me resilient in a way that I kind of miss. And I think the problem is we just have too many choices now. Gone are the days where you'd have to pop to the shop every day because you don't have a fridge in your house or a freezer.
But then I suppose the other side of that is if you do go to the shops and something happens, like you get chatting to someone, whether you're in a queue or whatever the case may be, then there is that moment, just put a little bit of a spring in your step, because you think, actually, that's lovely that that's just happened. I've just ended up talking to a random stranger for 10 minutes about X, Y, and Z, and that's brilliant. That's kind of what being a human being is all about, isn't it?
It is, and I think we get kind of locked into these mental landscapes in the same way we get locked into our digital landscapes, and it takes small things to break you out of it. Like if you go outside and it's pouring with rain, but actually you hear a bird and it kind of breaks you out of your internal monologue, and you just breathe out and you think, no, actually being alive is quite nice. And we have fewer and fewer of these moments where we're spending more time inside, more time online. We just don't have that. It's not even novelty anymore. It's just this tangibility to our lives that isn't there anymore. Yeah,
and the other part of this story as well, something else that Gen Zers are up to, something they don't like. It's not just going out, it's going to flipping work, for God's sake. Pat McFadden, of course, one of the honchos around Keir Starmer, prioritises helping nearly 1 million young people not working or studying back into employment. Now, there's always been a curious figure around this. It doesn't get talked about a lot. When Blair was in power in the 90s, the biggest cohort of unemployed were oddly young people. The economy was riding high. Everyone was doing really well. You could buy as many houses as you like. You could write a mortgage application on the inside of your leg and get a house. Everybody was doing fine. You could buy a brand new car. And yet the one group that was that represented in larger numbers of unemployment were youngsters. So I don't know if this figure is always among us, but 1 million young people not going to work or studying. What the heck's going on?
Yeah, so it's actually only 50% of young people aged 16 to 24 have a job. So you'd go, oh, well, most of the other 50% are in education. That's not true. Only 12% are in education, whether that be secondary, A-level, or indeed university. It's difficult exactly what to pin down, because it'll be a different factor for a different person. It could be their geography, it could be their education, it could be their family background. But I'd say the overriding problem is hopelessness. You can get a full-time job in London or the Southeast, and you will not make enough in income to rent a single room in a shared house to live independently. Yeah. That's a full-time job, and sometimes that's even above minimum wage. So in the Southeast, you really need to be earning in the region of 40,000 to be able to afford a sort of 1 or 2 bedroom house of your own. The fact that these things are completely out of reach now for even young people who work hard, who work more than the 38, 40 hours a week, who have multiple jobs, who went and got a degree and are trying to sort of break into the market. The employment isn't there. And what's worse is that what jobs are there for sort of very young people. So jobs now want experience. You need to have at least 2 years experience for this, 2 years, even making coffee, you know, it's like, I'll have a certificate in this, you know, barista, whatever. And young people don't have that because too many have gone to university and come out with degrees that are worth nothing, and the market is oversaturated with people who have degrees. It's become cheaper for people to travel internationally. We've got more and more people coming into the country who have employment and certificates and will work for less, who will get these jobs before young people. Like, just an example, the Domino's Pizza in my town, when it opened about 10 years ago, it was fully staffed by people from the local sixth form. Now I think there's one white local chap in there. The rest are immigrants. And so all of those jobs that would have given kids resilience, money simply to do driving lessons, you know, there's so many jobs still now rely on a car if you're not in a city, and if young people can't get the money for lessons and driving, and they, you know, it's parents are very lucky to be able to give that to their children, but most people have to do that for themselves. If they can't get a job, they can't do that. That shuts them out of the market even more, and so they find themselves going into education, trying to kind of put off finding the job. And most, you know, the majority of graduates, at least that I went to university with, went straight onto their master's degree, just to avoid it.
I was just going to say, it's interesting. I used to sort of, and for a long time, I always talked about the kind of over-analysing our positions, which I think is a kind of almost a tyranny on contemporary living. When I grew up, we, you know, living on a council estate, working class family, we were perpetually skint. You know, there really wasn't a lot of money around. It was just the way it was, and so were all our neighbours, and nobody talked about that very much. They just knew that that was the position they were in. However, we could still go to Cleethorpes on holiday once a year, and, you know, my mum and dad could buy us presents at Christmas and birthdays. There is an absolute, and you've just touched on it all there. Yes, it is true. We do overanalyze, and therefore we perhaps, in social media, hangs a few carrots that probably don't help this conversation very much. Look at what you could have and all that business. But there is still the thumping reality that life is, well, I can't say the word, very, very expensive. And it was never that controversial, was it? That you're going to leave school. I mean, the stereotypical story, you're going to leave school, let's say you go to work, and at some point, probably in your 20s, you're going to meet someone, then you're going to buy a house. Nobody went, you're going to buy a house? That was just like a thing people did. Now, that's a conversation that doesn't really exist if you're in your 20s. It's an impossibility, even if you're in quite a good job.
That was exactly the story my parents told me, and I fully believed it because everyone around me was doing it at that age. That was literally the narrative I was told. You're going to grow up, you're going to get a job, you're going to get married, you're going to have a house, you're going to have kids, you're going to get old, and then you're going to retire, and that's it. That's your life. But actually, I was discussing this with my dad this morning, and part of the problem is that parents are always wanting their children to do better than them. It's a natural instinct that every parent has. But there has been a sort of over-egging of expectations, particularly with employment, I think, that you can grow up and you can become anything you want. And parents have always encouraged their children, go to university. I wish I'd gone to university. But now there's such an oversaturation of university degrees, it doesn't give you graduation anymore. And if anything, it shuts you out of the job market because you don't have experience. And so it's just not how it works anymore.
Indeed. Charlie, listen, we have to stop there, but it's been great chewing the fat on this one. We will speak again. Charlie Bentley-Astor, writer and commentator on... I mean, it's a bit funny when you sometimes go, oh, look, Gen Zers are staying indoors, just ordering food and, you know, watching Netflix endlessly. But there's probably, if you fast forward 20, 30 years, you know, what that does to the changing face of how... I mean, it sounds like I'm kind of overstating it, but this is true. How humans behave, how humans will behave going forward, what that literally does to behaviour, integration, socialising, all the rest of it. The point about being skint, I mean, I don't even think that horror. And house prices, it would be great if there were house prizes, everybody would enter. House prices, I don't even think we've fully touched the sides on that either, in terms of what that's going to look like going forward, kids that remain at home. And as Charlie said there, You can be out working really hard, earning a moderate wage, and still can't afford, if you're looking at a place in a city, particularly London or Manchester, Edinburgh, you still can't afford a one-bedroom house in shared accommodation to rent. Forget the buying thing, that's a whole other stratosphere. So I get it. More from you on the way. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
I think more than one person has now suggested he cannot survive until the next election as Prime Minister. However, he's already exceeded my predictions, which was even before the election, that he wouldn't last beyond this year's spring local elections. He survived that long, and he probably will survive, actually, until next year's disastrous repeat of those elections, simply because of the structure of the Labour Party and its absence of any real method of getting rid of a serving leader.
Little birdie tells me that number 10 have been trying to keep quite a tight lid on the number of questions that will be asked.
Funny that.
Donald Trump, he's a pretty freewheeling guy, but he is also the guest here. Normally, when he hosts these sort of press conferences on his home turf in the Oval Office or in the East Wing of the White House, he takes a lot of has and he has a sort of pre-selected lists like Starmer likes to have of he knows what's coming, and he's much more of a free for all. I suspect that
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Trish in West Yorkshire says that regarding taxing state pension, it is already taxed if you have other income, of course. I have a small private pension, which is added to my state pension and then taxed, almost wiping out my private pension. State pensions should be exempt from tax, just like benefits, because the left consider it a benefit, which, of course, it is not a benefit. No, it's absolutely not a benefit. It is literally your money. Do you know, I went on the HMRC website the other day. It actually tells you on there how much your state pension's going to be. No matter how old you are, you could look at it now. Finn, you could look at it now, and it will tell you your retirement age and what your pension will be. I think it was about 240 quid a week or something, which is all very well if you've got other income, but 240 quid a week to live on, if you've got nothing else, you can see why these things become troubling. So I don't think it's going to happen, but it's interesting that it's even kind of hitting that territory. Let's go to Jill in Cornwall. Jill, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you too. Well, I was just watching the thing with Trump and the King and the marchers and the army and everything. And I must be honest, it's that side of this country, the culture within this country, that I get really worried about losing, about it getting shunted out by other cultures that are coming in that I disagree with intently. And that's why one of the reasons for the illegal migrants to sort of stop this happening is because I do feel that it is affecting the country and the culture and everything else. Yeah. And when I know Donald Trump is probably not the most popular person. His hair, for a start, is not the best thing ever, but there you go. When it comes to him having the what's the word? I'm trying to think of a better word than the balls to speak his mind.
Yeah. The might, the fight, whatever you like.
When I look at what we have stuck, we've got in our government, what is our I would quite happily swap Keir Starmer and Donald Trump, hair and all, just to sort of have the strength of character that Donald Trump has got. Because at the moment, we're on a hiding to nothing, and we're sailing down an avenue that's going to take us nowhere if we leave the Labour Party and Keir Starmer and all his numpties that he's got running this country.
You're absolutely spot on, and I think the point about Trump, and it's, rightly or wrongly, we are in a place now where you need leaders to also be good orators and performers, more than ever. I mean, that's always been the case to a degree, but more than ever. And so what you get with Trump is somebody who tells it like it is, lays it on the line and speaks his mind. And the fact that he shoots from the hip once in a while might make a bit of a faux pas, but we prefer that to reading out from some special advisor's pre-prepared press release, which sounds clinical, has no passion to it and no real kind of DNA or meaning. And Jill, I thank you very much indeed.
I think you've just described most radio presenters, bar you, me and the people on Talk.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm being serious.
There's a lot of that, isn't there?
Presenters who are too scared to lose their jobs, so they forget to do their jobs. You can love him or loathe him, Trump, but the one thing that he's done is he said to the American people, so what I'm going to do, vote for me. If you do, I'll do it. And he's done it.
Yeah.
On the day that our Prime Minister, yesterday, for the second time a plane left with no migrants aboard, not one in, one out, lots in and bugger all out, right? There landed an American president who said, I will deal with the immigration problem that you, America, the majority, won't deal with. No migrants getting to America anymore.
No one
so love him or loathe him, he's doing what he's told, isn't he?
I said earlier,
in
America, people are even scared to come back off holiday in case they get mistaken for somebody who shouldn't be
and they go, oh my God. No. I saw footage, CNN, I've talked about it a lot. A woman with a baby going on the border. There's no point in me. She didn't sound like that, but she said, there's no point in me going because I'm working in. No, because that's what they voted for. Wouldn't you love a Prime Minister with those cojones?
Yeah. And just had that sense of what you want from a leader is that you believe they believe. And that's it. It's that.
And that's why Farage has traction, because people believe his ear is to the ground, that he's listening, that he's read the room. The problem with Starmer is, and I'm not even talking politics here, I've got to the point with Starmer where I genuinely believe it, right? He's just not good at it. He doesn't smell it. It's not in his DNA. Nope. He's not reactive. Nope. There's no authenticity about him. He's just a bloody boring lawyer.
I can't top that.
I've heard. We've got a fantastic show lined up.
What do you say that on Call My Bluff?
Yes.
What is a Starmer?
Are you watching the tremendous royal?
It's amazing. They've just been in St George's Chapel, of course, laying a wreath